Welcome back to the Caucus Room podcast. I'm your host, Don Calloway. This is a show where we talk to veterans of American politics, media, and public affairs to figure out how we got here and what do we do from here. And today we have one of the most remarkable careers ever put together by an American politician with us. I will give you his resume. An attorney, a big law partner at an international law firm, a prominent PAC founder, lieutenant governor of the state of Maryland, National Party chairman, former chair of the Republican National Committee, a renowned media personality, a seminarian, a husband, a committed father, and has done some DJing. Welcome to the Caucus Room, my brother, Michael Steele. How you doing,
What's up,
sir?
man? It's so good to be with you, man.
Thank you for coming.
I'm glad you put that DJ piece in there.
It matters, man.
That's the real thing, right?
It is. Well, we'll get into it, man. And I seen, we've talked a little bit. You got some music chops. Maybe we might get into that.
A little bit.
We start every episode with a toast from a black-owned spirits and distiller. So these are my guys, the Brough Brothers out of Lexington, Kentucky.
Yeah.
They make a fantastic bourbon, and they are the only black-owned distiller in Kentucky. So, and we know that state's history with whiskey. So you got a bottle to go home with?
Oh my gosh, yes. I know how I'm going to start my night. There we go.
Yes, indeed. You got your own bottle to go home with, but go ahead, man. You got it. Pour yourself some, and we'll have a quick toast to get started.
Do this thing the right way.
Yes, indeed.
May I?
Please, thank you.
There you go.
Thank you. And we go neat. Ain't no ice in the Caucus Room, man.
Did you hear me ask for ice? did y'all hear me ask for ice? Did anybody? No.
You did not. Typically, I would make a joke here, but I know your mother just passed, and I know she is extraordinarily proud of you, and the world owes her a debt of gratitude for making you the man who's given us so much.
Thank you, man.
Cheers to your mother.
All right.
And
To Maybell.
Indeed, to Maybell.
All right.
God bless her.
There you go.
Brough Brothers. That's all right.
Brothers, y'all put y'all foot in this.
That's solid work right there.
This is really good. Smooth.
Yes, indeed.
I can keep hitting this, right?
Oh, it's all yours.
Okay.
All
cool.
yours. Have at it. Have at it. And more as you need, my brother. Origin story is important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you track a man's life from the beginning, you begin to get a sense of how his politics and experiences have shaped the thinker you are today. So give me the origin story. You are a D.C. guy.
I'm a D.C. guy.
You're so identified with Maryland.
City.
But you're from Petworth.
I'm from Petworth, and I'm actually glad we're starting here because as you mentioned, my mom passed recently. She was 96.
God bless.
And so she couldn't have children, and she decided that she wanted to adopt. And she went to St. Anne's Infant Home, as it was called back in the days. Now, St. Anne's Center for Children, Youth, and Families, and part of the Archdiocese of Washington. And she goes in, and the nuns take her into this room, and it's filled with cribs, with babies crying, doing what babies do. And the idea is for, impending parents to sort of walk up and down and sort of look and see which babies you like and get a vibe. So she's doing that with my dad, and they're walking back and forth. And she gets to my crib. She says, it's the funniest thing that I remember her telling me this story. She said, it was the funniest thing. She said, as I was getting close to your crib, you stood up. I stood up in the crib. And so she comes over and she looks at me, and I reach up to her.
Wow.
And she picks me up, and she looks at me, and she turns to the nun. She says, this is my son.
Wow.
And the power for me is she picked me. And a buddy of mine, when I shared with him her passing last week, he said, you have to understand talk about origin story. You have to understand the power of your origin stories, because a lot of moms, God places that child in their womb. But God whispered in your mother's ear, pick him.
Yes, indeed.
And so that kind of anchored the rest of my life. A lot of it has to do with choices. A lot of it has to do with affirming who I am as a young man, and a lot of that came from the woman who picked me. So from there, growing up in D.C., still somewhat segregated at the time. A lot of people, sort of gloss over those backstories about Washington. But it was sort of developing and learning a firmness, a purpose in an environment where you're told you have no purpose. And my mom again, and my dad died about 2 years after I was adopted. So it was mom and me for a long time. And then she remarried later on in '66 and adopted my sister later that year in her second marriage, my sister Monica, who herself would go on and chart a path as
Dr. Monica.
doctor,
Yes.
former wife of Mike Tyson.
Yo, so I'm glad.
So,
Yo, I was thinking about this.
Sister Monica, it's my girl.
Yeah, and you know, I'll keep it 100, man. I'm thinking about like, what can you ask about? What can you not? And so you lead with it, no pun intended.
No.
Right? So we can, let's just get into it. You were Mike Tyson's brother-in-law.
I was, and Mike and I still consider ourselves as brothers-in-law.
Wow.
We're that close. You know, the marriage was the marriage, and you know, they were married for about 5 years, but you know, they had 2 kids together, 2 great kids, my niece and nephew, and they have remained friends. And Mike's current wife and my sister speak frequently, mostly about him, and no, so it's a, you know, it's a closeness there, and Mike is I tell people the first conversation I had with Mike Tyson. Guess what we talked about?
Wait, what year? Which Mike do you encounter? So
the Mike who had just my sister and he started dating about 6 months before he went to jail.
And so you're talking about
95, 96.
A 90, because he's out in 95.
Right.
I'm a weird Tysonologist.
Right.
So he gets out in 95. The trouble happens in 93, 94.
Right.
So your sister somehow sees past the really nasty allegations.
Right.
And not only dates, but ends up marrying this guy. How do you feel as big bro here?
I was not ringing bells around the idea. And the first conversation we had, he was in prison. She called him up. We were going out somewhere, and I'm in her car, and we're driving along, and I'm talking about it. I'm expressing, I'm really not feeling this. This is not good. And she said, well, you just need to talk to him. I was like, okay, yeah, I can talk to him all day long. It's not going to change anything. She calls him up, the whole prison call system thing. And he gets on the phone. And you know, not the first thing, after the niceties of how are you? And I'm like, I'm good. How are you doing? You know, you're the one in jail. I'm out here. I'm out here riding in Bethesda. I don't know what you doing.
I'm free.
I'm free.
Yeah.
But he, you know, we started talking about political philosophy.
And this is a man who has Mao Zedong tattooed on his arm. Not a dumb brother by any stretch.
Not a dumb brother by any stretch. And his son, Amir, takes after his daddy in that regard. I mean, when Amir met President Bush, he laid out not only the history of Daddy Bush.
Come on, man.
Right? He laid out the history of every president from Washington to Daddy Bush.
Right.
And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
But there's this understanding and appreciation for history, which Mike has. And so we spent the next, 15 minutes, 20 minutes talking political philosophy, because he was curious about me as a Black Republican.
Right.
He was like, okay, so help me understand that evolution.
Right.
And not in a critical way, but he appreciated that there were, that this was where African Americans had their political founding in the Republican Party. But in the present day, how do you sustain it? How do you justify it?
And this is 95. This is not 2016.
This is 95.
Right.
Yeah. So we'd gone through some stuff, obviously, and it was for me, it was another side of him that was not part of the public persona and not part of the public conversation. So to have that sort of private moment with him really opened up. And he'll tell you, I've never been one of these folks, I got to take my picture with mine.
Yeah.
In fact, I can count literally on 2 fingers the number of pictures I have with me and Mike. And because for me, this is the man who's married my sister. So my first concern is my sister, given all the backstory, right? And once I realized, okay, she's good, she's safe, she loves him, and he loves her, then I'm like, okay, so now this is family. And I don't run around taking pictures of other family members and put them out on the public. So why am I going to do that with him?
Right.
So that was always my approach with him. And I think he appreciated that.
I think there's some interesting backstories specifically in your home.
Yeah.
You touched upon your mother got you from a Catholic orphanage.
Yeah.
And she ends up in short term a single mother, still a devout Catholic.
Right.
And she expressed some ideas very early about public assistance that I imagine have to be seen in some of your political ideas going forward.
They are. In fact, it animated my time as a lieutenant governor because it is a combination of what your mama teach you, right?
Yeah.
Which is common sense primarily. Your mama and your daddy going to teach you common sense. You can get all the book. You hope. And look, and you know, you don't want to paint with a broad brush because we know there's some bad moms and dads out there. And I do acknowledge that, who deprive children of that lane of opportunity and access. But for the good ones who try and despite meager beginnings and means and difficulties holding things together, making that personal sacrifice for Don or a Michael or a Sam or a Joe. Those folks, they are cut out of a cloth that is so invaluable to society as a whole. And so my mom, growing up a sharecropper's daughter, moving to Washington in 45 around the age of 18 or so, and working minimum wage jobs her entire life. When my mom retired, I remember doing her retirement papers and then her taxes that year. And she was making like $2.38 an hour. And I'm sitting there going, but I went to Johns Hopkins.
Yeah.
And my sister went to UVA.
How does that happen? Literally,
they worked 2, 3, 4 jobs.
Wow.
My dad, who's John Turner, who's 92, will be 92 in a couple of weeks. He and Mom just did what they had to do to provide for our family. They raised us, a lot of love, a lot of discipline, but a lot of freedom, if you know what I mean. It's just kind of get out there and do your thing. But they laid that groundwork because they were the ones up on Saturday morning to go do another job. They were the ones late Friday night coming from another job. And it just sort of knitted everything together for us. So, my mom wanted to make sure that as you do, remember others have done for you.
For you, right.
So this idea, she told my sister, she never told me this, but she shared this one with my sister, which we shared during my mom's funeral, that she would often say, she would tell me to always behave as if everyone is looking, not for the sake of looking at you, but looking at you as an example. So if you want to show your behind, that's the example you're setting. If you want to be dignified, that's the example you're setting. For my sister, who's 8 years younger than me, she would tell her, remember that the hand you receive with is the same one you give with. And that idea is that it's not just about receiving. It is also about what are you willing to give. And so those lessons animated my public service, animated my professional career as a lawyer, how I work with people. And you and I have been on air together. We have had at times disagreed on air publicly. But the one thing I've always known and respected and observed about you is your humanity. So no matter how much I disagree with you and you are wrong on Obamacare, I don't care what is, you're wrong, right? You are wrong on,
It was cool when y'all had it at the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah, exactly. It was a whole nother, but it was different then. Y'all just messed it up, that's all. But your humanity is the thing that I think today's political culture especially, but even more broadly, people lose sight of. And my mother always wanted to make sure that I understood that, hey, the person in front of you has stuff they got to go home to.
Yeah, just like you.
Just like you. And so you need to be mindful of that. And so it really informed how I behaved, because setting an example. But it also informed how I led, the kinds of things policies, for example, I would support, and would even very conservative policies. For me, the humanity of the individuals had to be taken into account. So while I'm all about creating wealth, I want to make sure, and I remember telling this to Jack Kemp near the end of his life, we were talking. And
Jack Kemp,
former vice presidential nominee, former Buffalo Bills quarterback, former United States congressman from New York. I remember talking with him, and I was at a home event with him, and this is like one of the last things he did. And we were walking out together and sort of talking, and I said, Jack, I've been really kind of, I felt like I've learned a lot sitting at your knee and sort of being in your space because by that point he'd already done the vice presidential thing, and I'd known him from a lot of different things in the past. And I said, I've been thinking long and hard about your idea of a rising tide lifts all boats. I said, that is so profoundly important. But you know what else I realized? You got to have a boat first.
Yeah.
So when that rising tide comes in, you don't drown in other people's success. You don't get swept away. So that you can rise like everyone else in that tide of prosperity and opportunity. And he looked at me and he goes, that's it. That's it. And so that's kind of how I look at public service, and how I look at these big policy issues where I may disagree with Mr. Callaway on his approach to taxes in the economy. But don't mistake my disagreement as just rejection of anything and just all corporate and all empowering the man. I think the man needs to pay her fair share, right? But at the same time, we can't lose sight of the fact that there are a lot of people out there who don't have a boat yet.
That's right.
And my form of republicanism has always been, I'm going to give you the tools. I'm not going to give you the tools. I'm going to help you with the tools you have, and then find other tools that you can use to build your boat.
So paint a picture. You're born in 1958. And you saw DC go through a lot of transition from this sleepy town, which is kind of the buttoned up center and seat of American government, to this extraordinarily vibrant global city where Black people have an outsized voice in civic affairs and public affairs, even while not being fully represented in Congress. But they're building this dynamic chocolate city that you grew up and witnessed.
Which is now a little bit more mocha than
It's a little bit different now. It's a little bit different now. But talk about you coming of age as a young man, and then politically in the shadow of Marion Barry's DC, and while the city is being built into what it became and still is today.
Man, that's such a good. I'm having all kinds of flashbacks right now, dude. I'm hearing the music and the sounds of the city I grew up in my head at this moment. So thank you for that. So what I've always said about Washington, D.C. is 99% of the people outside of the city don't know what it is.
That's so real, man. Yes. Yes.
Right?
Break that down. That's so true.
They don't know what it is.
True.
They really, honest to God, don't know what it is.
But they think they know.
They think they do. So all these folks who come into Washington, working on Capitol Hill, doing their thing, y'all don't know jack about.
And even if you get to know that, you still don't know
it.
DC.
You still don't know DC.
In the diamond, right? So talk about In the Diamond.
So quick DC origin story.
Yeah.
DC is carved out because our founders can't figure out where the hell to put the nation's capital. They didn't want it in New York. They didn't want it in Philly because of what those power centers even then would mean later on. And so they're like, let's find this swampy piece of patch of ground that no one gives a rat's ass about, and we'll just, Maryland, give us your portion, Virginia, give us your portion, and then we'll call it a day. And everybody's like, okay. Virginia later on goes, you know, we want our portion back. And everybody's like, okay. So, which is why DC looks the way it looks. It looks like an incomplete square.
Yes.
That's the diamond, kind of diamond look it takes on. So that's the origin story. From the beginning, people fighting over something they don't give a damn about. Think about that.
Yeah, and what
People, I mean, and I give you, so connect that dot. So of the idea of people fighting over something they don't give a damn about. When you hear members of Congress talking about second guessing the DC home rule, second guessing the choices citizens make, they're having this big fight over something in the end they don't care about.
And y'all ain't never cared about.
And never cared about.
Yeah.
Never cared about, not even when it was mostly white, because all the slaves and black folks were largely in the Georgetown area. Well, they ain't in Georgetown today, right? It's a whole different game. So that's the backstory for DC, a place that everyone fought over that no one cared about. And for those of us born and raised, and I say born and raised because I was born on an Air Force base, so, it connects. But the reality for me is being raised there especially, you really begin to understand that DC is about the people, it's about the neighborhoods, it's Sursum Quarter, it's Petworth, it's all these different places that make up the city. And what was fascinating for me as a young kid, everybody came to my front porch. I just walk out on the front porch and I got Martin Luther King giving a speech on my mall.
Right.
I got protesters screaming about the sexual revolution down the street and around the corner.
Right. And this is before it was just fully corporatized. So downtown is residential. This area is right next to the Capitol and right next to the mall.
Right.
Real people live
there. It's people in row homes.
Yeah.
Right? Members walking from their house to the Capitol steps, right? So it's and the neighborhoods have their own character.
That's right.
I grew up in Northwest. I can talk about people from Northeast.
Right.
I got a few things. And the bougie folks over in Southwest, we won't even get into that because they think they something.
Yeah.
And then the folks over in Southeast, God bless them. Right? So it's a whole different vibe, and people just didn't understand that all these big national events happened on our front porch. When I was in the seminary and I'm sitting up there in Philadelphia, and this is the way the newscast would start. So this is So President Reagan today had a meeting with fill in the blank world leader. But first, there's a fire in, right?
Wow.
And I would laugh because my local news was President Reagan had a meeting today.
Right.
Because that's my front porch. That's the local news for a lot of Washingtonians back in the day. So the things that actually happened in the city itself, the crime and the births and the citizen doing a really wonderful thing, all the real good drama stories, they were kind of wrapped up and subsumed into the big national narrative.
Right.
So I'm sitting there waiting.
Pennsylvania Avenue is drivable.
It's
the
drivable.
White House is accessible.
My daddy would drive me, and it never failed. We would drive by Pennsylvania Avenue.
He was gonna kill somebody.
He was a big son. He was gonna get somebody.
That was big.
My daddy would drive by, every time he drove by Pennsylvania Avenue, the White House, he would slow down. And he would deliberately drive in the right lane, and we would get there, he would slow down so I could look at the White House.
Yeah.
And he would tell a story about the White House. He would say something, connect me to that thing that is so far removed from this black kid, right?
Yeah.
But in fact, my DNA's in that building.
That's right.
Because my ancestors helped build it. And he would connect those dots in a way that would just amazing. I remember, dude, I'll tell you, open a floodgate here.
No, this is good.
When I ran for the U.S. Senate in 2006, I gave an interview and I was telling the reporter, I said, about my family, a little backstory. I said, yeah. And I said, what's really kind of ironic, because I was then running, no, this wasn't the U.S. Senate. This was our race for governor and lieutenant governor. And Kathleen Kennedy Townsend was 2002 was running for governor. She just served 8 years as lieutenant governor. And just as a footnote, Kathleen and I went on to become really good friends, and still to this day, I just have mad respect for her and what she did and what she tried to do. But in this moment, we're in the competitive heat. And I'm telling my little story from Washington, D.C., because everybody wanted to make a big deal. Oh, he's not from Maryland, he's from D.C.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, I want to do that Baltimore, D.C. thing. Okay, I got you, right? But I said, the fascinating thing was my daddy worked for RFK.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, he drove for RFK. And he was a chauffeur, a part-time chauffeur. And no one wanted to have that oh my God, you know, you want this image of her daddy, my daddy driving for her daddy, right? I'm like, no, my daddy loved RFK. And we had this real strong affinity. Look, Jack Kennedy's picture was on my wall with Jesus and Martin Luther King.
Which is not an uncommon.
No, it wasn't uncommon. So this wasn't sort of a political acrimony where, oh my God, you know, I could never, you know, acknowledge nor talk about her in a good way because I'm supposed to be a political adversary. No, our families were connected. Our families were connected. And that's okay. I can still run against you.
And
right?
it also kind of, without you saying it, you saying, yo, my dad was a chauffeur for RFK, who everybody has now deified.
Right.
It kind of, without you asking it, you're saying, what'd your daddy do?
What's your dad?
Yeah. My daddy was a chauffeur.
My dad wasn't what your daddy
He was a driver. What your daddy did?
That's right.
That's
right. And my mom cleaned office buildings.
That's right. What your mama did?
What your mom? She worked in a laundromat.
That's right. And there's no shame in that.
And there's no shame in that. You know why there's no shame in that? Because I'm the freaking lieutenant governor of the state.
That built me. That gave me an opportunity.
That's right. Let me tell you, man, the powerful moment for me is part of that legacy story. I'm standing on the State House steps, about to be sworn in, hand on Bible, arm, other hand up. And in that moment, I'm sitting there thinking, how did I get here? I mean, I didn't ask for it. I didn't even seek that out. I mean, it was not part of, okay, I'm going to be the lieutenant. I'm a DC boy, you know, happened into Maryland. Only reason I wound up in Maryland because my wife's like, we're not living in DC.
You got to get out the city at some point.
Yeah. My mom was like, we got to get out. And she said, look, she was a Wharton grad, finance, so she did the math. She was like, we can buy a brand new house.
Nice little
for X.
Wife pedigree flex.
Right, I do. Right?
You've done well, sir. You've done well.
We can buy a brand new house for X, or we can buy an existing home for X plus whatever else you got to put in to make it.
And by the way, out here I'm gonna have a yard. How about that?
Right.
Because we might have kids somewhere.
We have kids, right? So we have a backyard and front yard. But I'm standing there and I'm looking at this moment, and it dawned on me that literally behind me, 2-3 football fields behind me, Kunta Kinte was brought to this country as a slave.
My goodness.
To the Annapolis Harbor.
Wow.
And we would subsequently go on and dedicate the park at that harbor to Kunta and the Haley family. We had Alex Haley come up. His nephew, Chris, was a classmate of mine at Carroll High School, and Chris and I are still buddies today. But in that moment, legacy, man, hit me.
Yeah.
That is not just the legacy that Maybelle gave me, it's the legacy that I'm connected to with
your people
everybody else.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Johns Hopkins.
Yes.
Vanderbilt Seminary.
Augustinian.
Yeah,
Augustinian.
Okay. Johns Hopkins.
Right.
Augustinian Seminary.
Right.
Georgetown Law School.
Correct.
Moved to Cleary Gottlieb, Big Law.
Right.
here in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And like many of us do in the practice of big law, I have to imagine that a young Michael Steele gets a little bit bored, right? With the practice of big law and going to the office.
It's not my end game.
It's not your end game. That is a diplomatic way to put it.
It's not my end game.
And you're doing security stuff,
right,
but you're aware that you want to find some way to participate in politics.
Yep.
We just got this origin story where you're raised by a single mother, working parents, devout Catholic. What is it about the Republican Party at the time you come of age that makes you decide that in a two-party system where I can go D or R, I'm going to line up over here?
That's such a good question. And it's one that I don't know if people fully appreciate. So I would try to break it down very straightforwardly. So you really kind of walk with me in the process.
Yeah.
So my mother, my family, they were not political. They were Democrats. They were Roosevelt Democrats. My mom came to Washington in the Roosevelt period. FDR. And so aligned with the Democrats. But my mother also, when I was getting ready to cast my first vote in 1976, the presidential election. Now, we'd just gone through Watergate. We'd just gone through the resignation of the sitting president of the United States and the Republican Party. We'd just gone through a torturous presidential primary in which Gerald Ford, then president, having assumed the office from the vice presidency, was in battle with the likes of Ronald Reagan, among others, for the nomination. And that battle would rend itself all the way down to the convention floor where Reagan gave this, I think, classic and classy speech in which he stepped off the podium to give the nomination to the president, Gerald Ford.
This is 76.
76. And I'm watching all of this real time. And I'm getting into it now. I have one aunt in my family, my Aunt Josephine, God rest her, died last year, who was the only Republican in the family. as my daddy said to me, well, we don't really talk to her. But she was this really iconic woman. She was always this kind of cut against the grain kind of person, which I really appreciated about her. And so, but my mom told me the most important thing, and that was, be what you think you want to be or who you are. Don't be a Democrat because I'm a Democrat or your daddy's a Democrat. That's not how this should work for you. You decide. She said, why don't you go and learn about the two parties and make a decision? So I said, okay, and I did. I spent my summer of 76 doing summer stock theater, Godspell. And yes.
You're a show guy, man?
I'm a show guy, yeah. I did a lot of theater.
Okay.
Yeah, almost. I'll tell you my Broadway story in a moment, but if you're interested. Was doing summer stock, doing all these things, was going into my senior year of high school, and big election coming up, country's in turmoil. And my mom said, you make up your own mind. And I did. I went and I studied the history of both parties. And I recognized and appreciated the fact that as a young black kid, my origin story politically began in the Republican Party. With the likes of Frederick Douglass, who had a hand in shaping and forming the party. The 5, 6, 7 initial black members of Congress who were Republican senators and
your Blanche Bruce,
all those brothers were Republicans. The period of Reconstruction where the Republican Party developed the first, what the first affirmative action law was? The very first affirmative action law.
The Freedmen's Bureau.
Second affirmative action law.
What you got?
40 acres and a mule.
Which never came to fruition.
Which never came to fruition.
Special Order 15.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And the idea was the party said it's not just enough to free them. All right? Because free them to what?
Right.
They don't own anything.
Right.
Right? So give them 40 acres and a mule. But you're right. Oh, we can have a whole conversation why the hell Lincoln chose Johnson for his VP, but that's a different story. So I learned this history. Folks, learn your history.
Yeah.
All right? Just don't take crap people put out there for you. Learn your history. And I did. I learned my history, and I understood the value of the proposition of a party at that time that was born out of the idea that all men are created equal. They took literally the words of the Constitution and our founding documents. And that impressed me. That meant something to me. And I related it to my journey with my family, the conversations I had with my mom. I never forget asking my mom, when my dad died in 61, we had, and this is years later, we had the conversation about that period in her life. And I said to her, I never understood why you never went on government assistance, why you didn't take welfare, why didn't you take the government cheese? And her response to me was, I didn't want the government raising my child. I went, okay, that makes so much sense to me. It spoke to her understanding of the American dream as she was defining it for herself. That independence, that despite all the obstacles that she had to overcome, she still believed in this damn country.
But that's important, just that belief in practice of I'm not going to take this is important because that was not an uncommon belief.
It wasn't.
You hear, and I don't mean to affiliate you with this guy,
Right.
but we've heard a lot about Clarence Thomas's origin story recently through Joel Anderson and Slow Burn podcast, which I highly recommend.
Yes.
And he talks about Clarence Thomas's granddaddy who raised him saying, I don't want the government involved. And it's not only a simple matter of pride, but there's also this sentiment about, I don't want them in my business.
That's
I want
it.
to be accountable to
That's it. That's it.
When you think about
That was Maybell.
Yeah, and when you think about the broad principles that shape what this pre-Trump Republican Party is supposed to be,
Right.
those were principles that were shared by black folks.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it's important to establish that regardless of how you came to it, black republicanism, you were not an alien.
No.
By any stretch.
No, not at all. In fact, I would ask all of you to go out there and check your family history. Talk to your great aunt or talk to your grandmommy and ask them about their parents and ask about their parents' parents, and you'll find out you got a whole lot of Republican running in your family.
Right.
Because of that nexus, that connection to I love this origin story theme, so we've been carrying that forward, but that really does animate a lot of what comes next for black folks. And from that period forward, despite the travails, and even up to the late 50s when Republicans began to peel off of that because of the political calculation they were starting to make of how to win the presidency. Even though they had the success of 2 terms of Dwight Eisenhower, FDR messed up their minds, did something to them. Even with the restrictions put in place with subsequent amendments.
FDR messed up Republicans' minds?
Yes, because the country so galvanized behind him that they were willing to give him a 3rd term.
Yeah. No, they gave him a 3rd term.
That's my point. Yeah. They were willing to give him a 3rd term.
Yeah.
And that messed with their minds. The New Deal really screwed the modern day GOP going forward because they had a visceral political reaction. They lost sight of the need to care for people and to put government to work on behalf of people. Going back to what you just said about Clarence Thomas and his grandfather compared to what my mama said to me, and how the 2 of us, raised by 2 people with the same idea, come to 2 very different conclusions about the role of government. I am not a big government person, but I recognize government serves a limited purpose in the lives of people. It is there for that safety net. It is there to hold institutions accountable. all in the service of others. Why? Because our government was founded of, by, and for who?
The people.
Thank you.
But so I think it's interesting, this notion that government working for the people and government being a broad safety net for the people messed up Republicans, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, historically, the dark underbelly of that was, oh, FDR has our tax dollars going towards everybody. We don't want that.
Right.
Because public assistance in this country is great as long as it's going toward a small group.
So you're talking Hooverism. So you're coming off of the Hoover era, which bad policy making combined with a crash of the stock market creates this thing called a depression. And so the party, reeling from that, paid penalty point, obviously. FDR figures out the strategy, figures out the game. Now, you know, we sort of rewrite the history a little bit in the modern era.
Right.
But FDR's policies that people going, are you going to do what now? Even on Democrats. So wasn't everybody kind of going, oh, we're going to do this. But he had the stick-to-itiveness to push it through, the personality to do it, and other intangibles that worked in his favor. The political reaction was, in order to win the presidency, and people need to understand this about our history and why the 2000 election was so important, why the 1968 election was so important, why the 1960 election with Goldwater, 64 election, no, the Goldwater election, where he stands up and tells the country that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. You can't come up with a more bullshit statement than that.
Wait, break that down. Extremism
in the defense of liberty is no vice, right?
That is the intellectual justification for the Proud Boys.
Proud Boys, Jim Crow, Brown versus Board of Education, all of it.
Yeah.
So understanding why that had become, those election periods had become so important for the GOP goes back to how you win the presidency of the United States. And they made a calculation because the only way you could win the presidency was through the South.
Yeah.
The Democrats controlled the South. Why was John F. Kennedy going to Dallas, Texas in November of 1963? He was not going there because he just announced some brand new policy or program. He was going there to shore up his re-election bid in 64 because he was losing Texas. His internals were showing that his position on civil rights, which he had not taken publicly, right? Until very late, because of his brother.
Well, that's the thing. By November of 63, he's taken the position because he sends his brother to the University of Alabama.
Connect the dot for us. Go ahead.
Vivian Malone.
Thank you.
Who, by the way, Vivian Malone,
right.
Negro T,
right.
Eric Holder's sister, Dr.
Right.
Sharon Malone,
right.
Like your sister was married to a big time.
There you go.
Right?
There you go.
So your sister was married to Mike Tyson.
That's why we get along, by the way. That's why Holder and I get along. We do.
Eric Holder's Attorney General, Barack Obama's Attorney General, Eric Holder's sister is Dr. Sharon Malone, OBGYN of renowned practice on her own right.
That's right.
Her sister, deceased, Vivian Malone, is the student who integrates along with a young man, one woman, they integrate the University of Alabama.
Right.
That's important because for two reasons. I'm not going to say the reason you think.
No.
It's important to me because she was not a freshman. She didn't come out of high school.
Right.
Much like Rosa Parks, we know these things were curated by the authorities that were.
Right.
So they went to the state A&M College for Negroes, currently known as Alabama A&M, and said, give us your best and give us your brightest, and they find Vivian Malone. I went to Alabama A&M, so we're extraordinarily proud of this. But when it came time to find our best and brightest from throughout the state to present to the University of Alabama for the extraordinarily generationally important purpose of integration, they come to Alabama A&M to find a girl who's ready. And when she integrates, she does so with the imprimatur of the President of the United States via the law enforcement authority of the Attorney General,
Right.
and enforced by the military.
Yep.
And that supersedes this whole states' rights nonsense, right?
Right.
Because there's no Fox
So,
News, people talking about states' rights.
And everything you just said, the history you just laid out, what was the consequence?
Of
What you just said, what Kennedy did that triggered all the events you just described. The consequence was...
The consequence is, as laid out by LBJ, we've just lost the South for a generation.
Bingo.
There it is.
So why was John F. Kennedy going to Dallas, Texas?
To not lose the South for a
There
generation.
you go. So let's understand how that moment in history, the backdrop of that is the politics of race, is the politics of civil rights, is the politics of a period of time that white folks were beginning to realize that there were certain other white folks getting behind this idea of civil rights that a lot of black leaders were pushing hard up against. It was a continuation of Reconstruction, which they had, by the way, deconstructed after the fact.
Oh, let's be clear. Reconstruction was a shining period of progress in black history, and it's in the 1860s.
Right, in the 1860s. So we're 100 years later,
That's right.
103 years later, this is all taking place. And so you have all of these ideas that are flowing, and you're looking at a Republican Party that suddenly becomes bifurcated in its thinking. One part, the patrician era lineage, the Bush family is a good example. The Rockefeller family is a good example. The Carnegies, the Mellons, all of those folks was, look, very libertarian. Government don't bother me, I won't bother it. To the extent it does, don't touch my taxes, don't touch, between me and my wife, my relations, don't mess with me, right? And this emerging transition of white men in the South who'd grown tired of the dalliances of the Democratic Party, beginning to play with this idea of civil rights.
Yeah.
And Johnson nailed it because he knew. Of course he knew, because he was a segregationist. Of course he would know. He would know how white men would respond to this, because that's how he initially responded to it. But for the assassination of John F. Kennedy and the impending pressure to come from Robert Kennedy post the assassination, Johnson was that thorn in Kennedy's side during all of this. He was the one, after talking to Bobby, that JFK would hear Johnson go, "Nah, you really don't want to do that, because we walking if you do."
But ultimately, he was right.
Ultimately, he was right, and that is the backdrop of my story coming into the party. Knowing all of that history, knowing Nixon's calculation in 1968 to authorize a Southern strategy where the party would deliberately go after white segregationists to build up its ranks in order to win the presidency, to go to even the 1980 election, despite Reagan's very eloquent handing over the loss or standing in grace in losing the nomination in '76, launched his campaign for the presidency in Mississippi.
Philadelphia, Mississippi. Goodwin, Cheney, and Schwerner.
That's right. Sort of dog whistling up front, right? Despite all of that, the thing that drew me and continues to hold me is this idea of the individual's freedom, because that's the founding origins. That's the story of the Republican Party. It is why those black men ran under that banner for Congress. It is why Abraham Lincoln died. It is why Frederick Douglass wrote and said what he would write and say about not just the country, but about our space in the country, in this country.
It's the party of A.G. Gasson. It's the party of Jackie Robinson. And these is
the Jackie Robinson's piece is people aren't even nearly as clued in on his piece as they should be.
There's a fascinating exchange of letters between Jackie Robinson and Malcolm X.
Yep.
And they disagree, and you can tell they're writing on parchment, quill pen.
Right.
With all the eloquence that they can summon between the two of them. But there's two things that I think matter so much. It's not performative.
Nope.
They're writing snail mail,
Yep.
right? And stamping these letters for each other's eyes only.
Yep.
So they're not, even what we're doing now, there ain't no broadcast.
Ain't no broadcast.
Right? And I think there's a certain authenticity that comes from that lack of broadcast.
Yeah.
But I think, secondly, they emerge from it all with a respect for each other's intellect.
That's it.
And not only intellect, but they emerge from it with a respect for each other's good faith.
Right.
And not just good faith for America, but good faith for, after this exchange, I believe that you want the best for black folks.
Right.
And I want the
unlike
best
what
for
we
black
saw with Booker and Du Bois, right?
I think there's
Very
some
different. There's some
similarities.
similarities, but at the end of the day, were they really in the space you just described?
No. Booker and Du Bois was fully performative because they're doing it at these grand conventions.
That's what I'm saying. Well, that's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So you really need to understand the public versus the private moments in these types of conversations, because in those private moments you really begin to hear and feel exactly what the truth is.
That's right.
And for me, those private moments offered up a truth that I figured, despite growing up in a city that was segregated, despite having friends who looked at me cockeyed because I aligned myself with this ideology of republicanism, it made sense to me. So to complete the narrative of my mother's entreaty to go out and figure it out on my own, don't do because I do, don't be because I am. It made sense. And as I tell people when they ask me, why are you a Republican? I say, because Maybelle raised me well.
Yeah. So here's the challenge to that.
So we went a long way around the barn for that, but that's the truth of it.
Listen, I'm just glad to be able to talk this shit without a producer in your ear saying, wrap it up. You know what I mean?
And y'all can edit this down however you want, but this for me is, look, I'm going through a very tough time right now, and in so many ways, I can't tell you how cathartic and important it is to A, talk about my mom, and B, to just sort of share a little bit of that story.
Yeah, so. It matters, man. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
We'll stay at it. So, tough question.
Yep.
You come out of law school, you're at one of the world's leading law firms, you're not working in litigation. You and Reg Lewis have the foresight to choose the corporate route.
That's right. Although he did better than I did for some reason. I don't know. He went left.
You did extraordinarily well, but it depends on what you consider better.
Yes.
It depends on what you consider.
I am happy where I am.
Both Maryland brothers of a certain, he's a lot older than you.
He's a little bit older, yeah.
So, but here's the thing. You're highly educated. You are entirely prepared. And you're a real brother. You come from DC and you have real experience with the black condition.
Yep.
During the crack epidemic, during Iran-Contra, during the war on drugs, during this time of hyper-policing and saturation of resources to police our community, during mass incarceration, which our people, Democrats, are as responsible for, crime bill, all of that. But you are deciding as a young man coming politically of age that this is the party for you.
Right.
Is there anything in that entire list of maladies that doesn't sit right with you?
All of it.
And why do you stay around?
All of it. All of it doesn't sit right.
Why do you stay around while
so
the
let me ask you
leaders are
this.
actively doing it?
Let me ask you this. Is it easier to change hearts and minds standing outside the walls and pissing on the lawn and throwing eggs at the house and toilet papering the trees and yelling at them? Or is it better to do that inside the house?
I think we need both.
We do.
Yeah.
And I chose to be inside the house.
You and literally one of your political peers, Condoleezza Rice, decided
to be in the house.
Around the same time
to be in the house.
To be inside.
And the reason
to be house Negroes. No. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying literally.
I'm not saying that. And you just said it.
No, we're gonna cut that out. We're gonna cut that out.
No, you can leave it in.
No, you literally said you're saying, not mine, to be in the house,
Right.
which is one of the few Negroes in that house at that time.
Yeah.
What's that look like? What's that feel like?
It's not easy, dude. I'm not, and I never claimed, which is why, I mean, if you won't say it, I'll say it. I wasn't that kind of house Negro.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they fired my ass ultimately.
They did.
They were pissed at me.
They did.
Because I refused to carry the buckets of crap that they wanted me to carry. When they're sitting there and giving me a speech that would denigrate the first black president of the United States, I told them, I'm not reading that.
And I think it's important, like, this isn't you saying this. 1993, when you are a fully grown man, you're not a
Right.
baby lawyer anymore.
Right?
You start the Republican Leadership Council.
Yeah.
And the Republican Leadership Council, by its own charter, which I found, is socially inclusive
That's right.
and fiscally conservative.
That's right.
So you're talking about diversity and diversifying within the professional corporate constructs of the Republican Party
30 years ago.
30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that matters,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah.
you're not talking DEI
So I'm not
stuff
new to
'cause
this.
it's cool. I'm not
right.
new to this.
I'm not new to this.
Yeah.
And I've always tried to get people to understand fun. And I tell this to young politicians especially, don't let them define who you are. And I'll admit to some extent, I've kind of learned a little bit of that later in life. But at the same time, I knew in certain moments this was important enough to put your mark on it, to put your imprimatur on it and say, no, this is who I am. And so the reality for me is I consciously was aware of all the crap. But I looked at the other side and said, well, their crap a little bit messed up because the KKK did kind of form inside their backyard. So, you know, so I'm looking at all of this stuff between Democrats and Republicans. But fundamentally, what mattered to me is who's talking about my freedom, because that's what the party opened with. It opened with that. In fact, it broke away from the Whigs because of that.
Yeah.
It started itself on this idea that my freedom meant as much as any other white man in this country.
No,
But that doesn't necessarily speak to how next and future generations are going to implement that idea.
Yeah.
And how they may regress, which is why I tried to give a little bit of that history about Nixon and Goldwater and others making political calculations at the expense of my freedom.
Yeah.
And staying inside the party to hold up that mirror and say, is this you?
Yeah.
Is this what you look like?
Yeah.
And they don't like that. They don't like it. Liz Cheney did that. Liz Cheney sacrificed her leadership to hold up the mirror and say, this you? Really? So you with this guy here.
So I like that stuff, and I think Liz Cheney has eked out a place in party history, and some could call her a hero. The challenge to that is when he descended the steps
Right.
at his building in June of 15.
I was like, y'all don't want that.
Right. But all of the worst elements that came to play out throughout his presidency and even now were fully on display then.
Right.
There's nothing new.
So here's the point to your point. There was a thinking, a mindset inside the Republican Party, which has been there for a long time, going back to Reagan, that believed, and continues to believe, we got this. We can control this.
Yeah.
We can manage this.
But you can't.
But you can't.
Yeah.
And Trump proved you can't. You cannot manage Trump.
And so if the lesson of Trump is that actually, it goes before Trump. If the lesson of the Tea Party is we cannot manage this, it will mushroom. Then you get Trump. We cannot manage this, it will mushroom.
Okay, so
then you get a Matt Gaetz. Why in January?
But we did manage the Tea Party.
Not really.
Yes, we did.
Not really.
I'm gonna tell you how.
They don't call themselves the Tea Party anymore, but that element is still there.
Let me break you back a little bit. Tea Party existed between 2009 and 2012. Okay? 2009 and 2012.
Yeah, that is, yes.
The traditional Tea Party that I inherited, that came on my watch in the spring of 2009, and I can say this authoritatively because I sat down with them. 50 representatives from every state came to Washington
Tea Party Express.
to meet with me in at the RNC.
You're the chair. Yeah.
And I'm the chair.
We skip forward a bit, and I want to go back.
In April of 2009.
You're the chairman of the RNC.
I'm the chairman of the RNC.
Which, nice little flex, as you told Rush Limbaugh, I am, my black ass, I am the de facto, what?
Chairman.
I am the de facto leader.
I'm the leader
of the Republican Party. However you feel about it.
However you feel about it, I am the leader of the Republican Party because unless there's a president, the chairman leads the party.
Yes, that's right.
Period.
Joe Biden is the CEO of the Democratic Party.
Joe Biden is the titular head of the Democratic Party.
Barack Obama was the
titular head of the Democratic Party.
But there's a two-party system.
It's a two-party system. And I was the head of the party because there was no titular head who would supersede me as chairman.
Talk about how it came that you had to flex some muscle on Rush Limbaugh. And I think that whole scenario is fascinating because you find a way to grab Rush Limbaugh by the collar and say, look here, I run this. And all the millions that come from this and all the opinion and shaping and narrative and candidates that come, hey, I got this. And I'm duly elected.
Right.
I run this.
Right.
Whether or not you like it. And you found a way to toe the line between opposing Barack, but not, President Obama.
Right.
But not disrespecting President Obama.
Never would.
And you checked that emerging voice who was telling Republicans to hate this Muslim from Kenya.
And a lot of people think that I apologized to Rush for that.
I was gonna get there.
I know you were. And
this is the second time you've preempted the jab.
I would. My brother-in-law's Mike Tyson.
Buried the jab. I like it.
Come on, man. You think I learn when I'm around people.
Buried the jab. I like that. So, and this time you saw it before I threw it. Okay, strong.
So the reality of it is, I never apologized to Rush Limbaugh. I had no need to apologize to Rush Limbaugh. Why would I apologize for my leadership? Find me the article in which you say, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Never happened. And the words never left my mouth.
There's some apology quotes out there.
Like what?
I can find it. Now, I'm going to dig it up.
Yeah, dig it up. No, but I mean, I'd love to know. I'd love to know.
I'm going to do this.
Put the brother to work.
But I found the quote.
You found the quote?
Yeah.
Okay, go. Hit me with your quote. Go ahead, hit me.
Washington Post, 2009.
Oh, yeah, your real friend, yeah.
2009.
Okay.
RNC chairman apologizes to Limbaugh for claiming that his voice is not representative of Republican leadership.
So that's very true. But it is very important to understand, and Washington does what it typically does. It sees in things what it wants to see. I did not apologize to Rush. What I apologized for was creating a distraction. I've always believed, as part of my political ethic and my political infrastructure, we're building things. You do not make yourself the story. Mm-hmm. You do not create noise within the story that distracts from the thing you're pushing out.
Okay.
And so in that moment when I had said what I said, A, I meant it. B, I wanted to reaffirm it. But C, I realized, and this, I'll give you the backstory in a second, I realized that I had created an unnecessary distraction that was harming the institution that I led. Backstory. So I call Rush Limbaugh the day the quote comes out. And we're talking, now keep in mind, I've known Rush probably about 15 years at this point. He had come in and done an event for me in Maryland when I was state party chairman back in 2000. So that was 9 years, but I'd known him I grew up listening to this man on radio and felt for the first time conservatives had a space in which we could articulate our ideas and our views on policy, which did not exist in mainstream media. Walter Cronkite, whom I watched every night at 6 p.m., was not telling stories or laying out policy from a Republican perspective. So there was this whole other side that existed that was never told. So someone like Rush coming on board in the 1980s was a big deal for a lot of conservatives. He transformed the medium of talk radio, created it. So there was no animosity with this between me and him.
But even early Rush is saying crazy.
Early Rush is saying crazy, but so Early Rush saying crazy stuff had not fully translated among rank and file Republicans as, oh yeah, we got to be crazy too. Right. Understanding.
I think that context is important.
No, that context is important because remember this is why I said what I said, because he was entertaining.
Right.
He was entertaining people.
And he was an entertainer.
He was an entertainer. Yeah. And the thing about it is Rush himself referred to himself as an entertainer, which is where I borrowed that quote from. It's like, well, you call yourself an entertainer, he's an entertainer.
Therefore, I'm the leader.
He's the entertainer, I'm the leader.
Right.
So I call Rush up and I'm having this conversation. He's laughing. He was like, Michael, I know, you and I go way back. It's not a big deal. I'm not taking this personally, right? I'm like, good. The next day, Rush goes on his radio program and lights my ass up.
Oh, he called me and apologized.
And at that point, that was the last conversation I had with Rush Limbaugh.
Good for you, man.
Because you don't get to do me like that. You don't tell me. And actually, when I stop and think about it, it was a precursor to what we would see out of Republicans today, where privately they tell you one thing, but publicly they say something, do something else. That is a lie to what they told you privately. I despise Donald Trump. Oh, Donald Trump, he is the leader of our party. Hey, Michael, no, I know what you meant. I know exactly what he told me. I know exactly what you meant. You're right. I mean, that's what I do. I entertain people. And the next day goes on, and why? Because that's where the grift in the party began.
Yeah.
That's the grift. I can make money off of this.
Break that down.
I can make money off of your misfortune, your misstep. I can use it to my advantage, even though I know I'm full of shit right now in saying what I'm saying, because I know the truth. I can make money off of it.
But the problem is when that grift translates to the actual governing attitudes of the rank and file in state legislatures and school boards.
That's it. It's a problem.
And they listen to him, not you.
That's right. They listen to him and not me. So, sidebar on that point you just made. My finance director comes to me at the end of that week when that happened.
When you're the RNC chairman.
I'm the RNC chairman. I just called Rush Limbaugh an entertainer and not the leader of the Republican Party. And that by the end of that week, we saw a 30% drop in our donations.
Wow.
The second week, we saw another 30% drop in our donations. Two things go off in my head at the same time. One, oh crap, because I've got now a plan to try to win elections that November, right? With Chris Christie and Bob McDonnell on the ballot for governors of New Jersey and Virginia, respectively.
2011.
2009.
That's right.
2009. So I can't afford to have my fundraising dried up because I'm going to need about, I don't know, $60 million to do these two races. So there's that. But then I realized just how interconnected the messaging and the money had become. That there was a growing cohort of the base that would pay to be pleased.
And this is a year before, literally a year before Citizens United.
This is a year before Citizens United.
Which blows open the doors.
And I can tell you the backstory on Citizens United too.
Go.
A lot of people don't know the backstory on Citizens United because it was not the case I had before the Supreme Court.
So let's be clear about what this is. Citizens United is a Supreme Court case which ultimately decides that, and I'm paraphrasing on broad strokes, political contributions amount to protected First Amendment speech.
Correct.
Therefore, it is not appropriate for limits to be placed on them.
Correct.
Allowing for, in practice, open money to flow into political coffers.
Bingo.
Break that down.
So I'll break it down by disclosing. One, I have always believed what I do with my dollar is a form of speech. If I want to give you $1,000 to run for office, if I want to give you $1,000 to run your business, whether you're public or not, if I want to give you $1,000 to run your podcast, that's my expression of speech saying, I support this brother in what he's doing, right? So I've always believed that money is a form of free speech. However, I also know, because I've been inside the bubble, that there should be appropriate limits. And one of those very important limits, which Citizens United completely threw out the door, was disclosure. Virginia, for example, and I've always supported the Virginia law on this, unlimited money to candidates running for office. But within 24 hours, you have to fully disclose a whole lot of information.
Right.
So if I don't want to be associated with Group X, I'm not taking Group X money. If Group X don't want to be associated publicly with a candidate, Group X isn't writing that check.
But isn't one of the nuances of the ramifications of Citizens United this notion that, yes, we require disclosure,
Right.
but it's disclosure from entities, these dark money entities that don't have to reveal who their members are?
So good question. That leads me to the companion case to Citizens United, which was brought by the Republican National Committee before I became chairman. But then when I became chairman, I took up the mantle of prosecuting that case, pushing that case forward. And in that case, it was the repeal of McCain-Feingold.
Yes.
The McCain-Feingold law, as you recall, said that political organizations were capped at the amount of money they could receive from private donations. Up until McCain-Feingold, so we sought the repeal of McCain-Feingold. Up until McCain-Feingold.
McCain-Feingold goes into effect in what year?
That's a good question. I think it was 2002, 2003, somewhere in that space. It's not current. It's been in place for a while.
It's been in place for a while, but it's not it's around the Sarbanes-Oxley.
It's around that period of time, right? So this is when everybody was into government reforms and all of that. And one of those big reforms was campaign finance.
That's right.
So Senator McCain, who was a longtime friend, I was a huge supporter of his bid in 2008. I thought he was just wrong on this law. And it's been proven in time that I was right, that he was wrong. And the reason is because McCain-Feingold said that state parties, county parties, national parties are limited to $38,000 in what I can get from you as a donor.
Yes.
Why? Because we don't want money in politics. Okay. So what happens in that interim, while McCain-Feingold has been in the ether for a while, lawsuits kind of work their way up into the system. Meanwhile, you have Citizens United run by David Bossie. Remember, because that was wrapped around the Hillary Clinton video. I believe it was a video or something with Hillary that the video he had put out.
Okay.
They had produced anti-Hillary a video. And it made its way up to the Supreme Court. So you've got the RNC case that repeals McCain-Feingold, right? Which would, before McCain-Feingold, you write a check to the RNC. We have to disclose that every 30 days. Who the donors are, their work, their addresses, phone, all of that's public information that we are required by law to this day to disclose. Citizens United had a group, had this organization, this PAC created that funded an anti-Hillary Clinton video. They were sued on that, right? Expending public money, right, for this purpose, that they had gone out to the public and without disclosing who their donors were, et cetera, raise this money. Supreme Court goes, RNC case dismissed.
Okay.
Citizens United,
We'll hear that one.
we'll hear that one,
Right.
and they ruled in favor of Citizens United. If the Supreme Court had taken a different view, then we wouldn't be where we are today with all these PACs popping up, because all the money that people complain about in politics would flow through the DNC
That's right.
and the RNC as it once did. And every 30 days, you would know exactly who's contributing to the parties, how much they're contributing, all of it. So for me, that was an important moment where it took away or distorted individual contributions in such a way that they're now a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before, if I wrote $1 million check to the Republican Party, no one would care, right? Because you know it, first off. It wouldn't be in secret because they'd have to disclose it. And number two, I'm putting it into this amorphous, large, big structure that then has to define how decide how they're dividing that money up to go to your race in Michigan or that race over in Florida, or we're going to help the state party here in Nebraska. So that $1 million gets broken up. It's not concentrated
Right.
where it's all going to flow into your race. That's what the NRCC, the National Republican Congressional Committee, the Companion Democratic Congressional Committee, the NRSC, the National Republican Senatorial Committee, Companion DSC for the Democrats. That's what they do. They concentrate on the individual races.
Right.
They concentrate on individual candidates, whereas our money goes into the operation of politics and campaigns, the operationalizing, the infrastructure of campaigns. But all that got thrown out with Citizens United. I'm not a fan of Citizens United. While I do agree in principle with the idea of money being free speech, I am not happy with the outcome because it took the key and important element of disclosure. Disclosure equals trust. Because if I disclose transparency. Let's put it this way. Disclosure equals transparency, and transparency equals trust. That's the way to put it.
A personal weird historian quirk I have is I am fascinated by the notion of African Americans who hold statewide office.
Okay.
Currently hold statewide office. And I probably can't do this today, but there was a time in the recent past in which I could tell you every African American statewide office holder ever, from governor down to,
the numbers have grown a little bit.
State dog catcher, right? And the numbers have grown a little bit, and that's a good thing. But you were one of the first, and you were one of the first to even fathom an office like the number 2 guy in the state. But deciding to accept a position going directly to the top is an audacious gesture. You don't start at the city council, county council, state legislature.
I never held elected office.
You never held elected office until you run for lieutenant governor.
But I'd run parties from the county level up. I was a grassroots
that's the thing.
activist.
You get there as a party activist.
Right.
Or you get there as a party operator.
Right.
So break that down, your path to statewide office.
That's a good question. I never sought it out. It's the great irony is that all the positions I've held in politics I never asked for nor sought. I never did. When I became county chairman, you know how I became county chairman in Prince George's County? I was invited to a county meeting, right? I just literally moved into Maryland from DC in 1986 after I got married in 1985. And I say, oh, okay, I get it, because DC had no Republican infrastructure, right? So there was.
But you've decided at this point.
But I work with Democrats.
I'm a Republican. I want to do this.
Right, and the irony is, my political mentors were all Democrats. I think they took pity on me. Marion Barry. We can talk about me and Marion Barry.
We need to.
Great story. To this day, I will defend Marion Barry to this day.
And not most. Any black man from DC of your era should and will and should defend Marion Barry.
Absolutely.
So give me some Marion Barry.
So we'll get back to Prince George's and the county party. So DC, my friends in high school, female, male, were oftentimes the sons and daughters of political figures in Washington.
Okay.
My parents, as we've discussed, were not political activists. They weren't politically connected. They never contributed to campaigns, although I think my mom may have written a check for like $5 to Marion Barry at some point.
Yeah.
She loved Marion Barry. Both my mom and dad loved Marion Barry. Marion Barry was the quintessential leader of Washington. He took the concept of Chocolate City and gave it power because it was otherwise disconnected from home rule and power and structure. And he made that connection. And I'm not trying to rewrite his history. It was a torrid history, personal demons he had to deal with. The best of Marion Barry occurred between 78 and 82 when he first got into office. That was the period that I came into his orbit, worked on his campaign as a Republican.
You worked on Marion Barry's campaign?
As a Republican in 1978.
Wow. The summer jobs program, that's a real thing.
Yeah.
It made real differences, right?
It made real differences. I was just a little crazy volunteer whenever I come back from Johns Hopkins. That was, I was in my junior year that year, sophomore year, during that election cycle. So yeah, for me, it was home. And this guy coming off his work, on the school board, dashiki and all afro, I respected that. I believe it or not, I'm really a contrarian. I like to blow stuff up. I hate the political establishment. I hate the established order of things. If it's so rigid, it refuses to change itself when its surroundings and its environment are changing. And so he was that change agent in many respects. I gotten to know Walter Washington, the first appointed mayor of Washington, subsequently elected.
People that where we do CBC every year is at the Washington Convention Center, and I'm like, no,
it's not
this
right.
Is not
Thank you.
DC. This is the Walter
Washington Convention Center.
Yeah.
Let's be clear about what it is, and that's why I say people don't know DC because they don't know neighborhoods. They don't know the people and why the people. I'll be blunt. White folks still don't get how Marion Barry got reelected after coming out of jail.
You know what's funny, man?
They still don't get it. I'm sorry, y'all just don't get it.
Way TMI, but my metric for judging whether or not I can be friends with a white person who lives in Washington, D.C. is, at some point in the first month of our friendship, I'm going to throw out, how do you feel about Marion Barry? Because let's be clear,
That's it.
Marion Barry, to the extent that, we live in Maryland now.
Right.
But to the extent that we all enjoy the fruits of the megalopolis that is Washington, D.C.,
Right.
Marion Barry built that.
Bingo.
And I ask every white person, because we love them.
Right.
And
right.
we love
You don't come up here talking about Marion.
We don't allow it.
Don't allow it.
At our
Sorry.
table. But every white person, my baseline threshold question is, I'm going to find a way to ask you what you think about Marion Barry.
Right.
And your answer, it's almost like, I'm going to ask you about Coach Prime today.
Right.
And your answer is going to tell me what I need to know about you.
Yeah,
because you're benefiting from the fruits of his labor.
And he was, for me, had become for me, and would become even more so later, which I'm happy to share, in my career, that connection between Washington and Maryland, between public service and commitment, and understanding what that is. And as I would tell people when I mention his name, and they kind of roll their eyes and they're like, oh my God, they start talking about the drug habit and they start talking about the prostitute. I was like, do you know why they reelected him? Ask him. Because he did something for them.
Come on now.
Mamas didn't have to worry about where their kids going to work that summer.
That's right.
They had a job.
Summer job program.
Summer job program.
Yeah. Which means, and I think that's the disconnect. We get caught up in the horse race and all this nonsense.
We do.
But politics is about delivering.
Did you deliver what you said? Thank you.
Services and opportunity.
Man, they picked up the trash.
Yeah.
Man, they cleared the snow.
Yeah.
And what happened when he was in Florida and the snowstorm hit, or I think he was in Florida, but the snowstorm hit and he wasn't here? he took a hell of a hit. And he got his ass on the plane to get back here a day later because he realized, oh, crap.
And there's something to be said about however it was at 44, however it was that he came into my public consciousness, the bitch set me up.
There you go, right?
However I came to know of him, there was a time before that.
Yep. And I was a part of that.
You were a part of that time, right? And there is a moment in which, no hyperbole, for this city in its development, Marion Barry is Barack Obama.
Bingo.
Long before
Barack Obama.
And there was a Harold Washington.
Yep.
Louis Stokes.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
yes. That tradition of actually doing public service and making it real for the people. So Marion had this ability to do that. Those lessons that in watching him work, I'll never forget this. I'm running for the United States Senate in 2006. 11 o'clock at night, I get a phone call. Hey, Michael. Hello? It's Marion. Mr. Mayor, meet me at your sister's. I'll be there in 30 minutes.
This is 06.
11 o'clock at night. I'm like, okay, my sister's in Bethesda. I'm in Prince George's. He's in D.C. Okay, 11 o'clock.
We gonna meet.
I get in the car. I get to my sister's house and walk in, and Marion Barry sitting there in the living room. Sit down, let me talk to you about your race.
That's heavy. That's heavy.
Next hour, this man spent with me, and he said, remember what I did in Ward 8?
Come on, man.
You need to go out and you need to talk to people.
And let's be clear, Ward 8 was then and now the most challenged, underserved community.
Remember what I did in Ward 8.
Come on, man.
I made those people relevant. They had to pay attention to them. They had to pay attention to them. I didn't win every battle. He said, you're not going to win every battle. He said, but you need to go out and make the case for the poorest people in your community.
So when you are running statewide in Maryland, a relatively well-set state.
Yep.
What is your Ward 8?
My Ward 8 is Baltimore City. My Ward 8 is Prince George's County. My Ward 8 is parts of Western Maryland that white folks don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
My Ward 8 is part of the Eastern Shore that folks don't want to talk about, right? Because if Jesus told us, you will always have the poor among you.
Yeah.
You will always have them there. Your responsibility is to recognize them and to serve them. And that's how I set up my public service. That's how I went into my job as lieutenant governor. Hell, it's how I do politics. It's how I operated as a county chairman, as a state chairman, as national chairman. Yeah, I can be partisan with the best of them, but at the end of the day, the end game has got to be about what are we promoting and who are we promoting it for? And look, I'm not sitting there thinking, I'm saying oh yeah, well, I didn't make any mistakes. I made plenty of mistakes and I got a lot of wrong and backed some stuff probably I shouldn't have backed. But at the end of the day, my intention has always been anchored the way Marion and Walter Washington, who I had a chance to talk to, Joe Yeldell, who I had a chance to, who mentored me.
Richard Hatcher.
Come on. David Clark.
The David Clark School of Law.
Thank you.
At UDC.
David Clark.
2 HBCUs in this town. Come on.
Talk to me about
the land grant in this town is UDC.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So these guys informed this young black Republican kid, which is why Republicans don't recognize my politics. Because it's not born out of what they did and how they approached it. And I always tried to get Republicans to understand.
You're saying you ain't a country club Republican?
I'm not a country club Republican. Never have been, don't even know where the country club is.
But how does it, how does it feel as you burst onto a national scene in 2006 as a Senate candidate and as a lieutenant governor in 06 Senate candidate, but you go global when you become the counterpart to Barack Obama?
I know.
How does it feel for Black America to look at you as, what's wrong with this nigga? Because we've established that you are so thoroughly one
I
of
had
us.
Family members call me and go, fool, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
You know, Barack, really? I'm like, yeah. I got it. I got the joke. I knew what was up. right? Okay, I get it. You think I'm going to be your counterweight to this black man. And it said a lot. People step back for a moment. It said a lot about what they thought of Barack.
Break that down.
Okay. You're taking a former lieutenant governor. Okay, I got that. That's good. You're taking a county state party chairman, and you're setting him up to be the counterweight to the president of the United States?
Yeah.
What it said is they didn't see him as the president of the United States.
Come on, man.
They saw him as just a black man.
A black dude.
And so we can counter your black man with our black man. And that, to me,
but why did
was very, very offensive.
Yeah.
Very patronizing. But what I saw was an opportunity to prove that two black men can stand on a national stage in opposite parties and run the country.
Come on, man. Come on, man.
You say you want to do Obamacare? I say, no, we ain't doing that. You say you want to do cap and trade? I'm like, no, let's talk about the economics, right?
Come on, man. Yeah.
It was never, for me, and I can share some backstories on Barack, because I think Barack is a very political animal.
Yeah.
Much more partisan than his persona would lead you to believe.
Certainly.
But for me, it was all about, and I really wanted this to happen. So Barack, if you're watching, I really tried to make this happen.
We're going to get him by
I really tried to get
episode 4 or 5.
I really went, right?
We're going to get him.
I really tried to get you to do this. My folks reached out to you, back channel, for you and me to meet for a reason. Because for me, it was important at this moment in this time for these two brothers to talk to each other.
Yeah.
To have an understanding of how we're going to move in space. Because I was never anti-Barack. In fact, you can go back and watch the NAACP discussion I had leading up to that 2008 election. I was invited to speak to the NAACP, and they grilled me. Do you support Barack? No, I don't, because I disagree with his policies.
Because I'm a Republican.
Not just because I'm a Republican, because I disagree on his policies. And I walked through what I disagree with. I said, I think it's a fine brother. I knew Barack when he was state senator. Reached out to Barack when I was lieutenant governor. I was the only black statewide elected official in the country at the time. Reached out to him, welcoming him to Washington, because it would be two of us.
That's right.
He refused to meet with me. So I'm like, okay, we tried. We did try. But the reality of it is, I was not going to be that black Republican counterweight to the first black president of the United States.
And we do not have a public record of the Tea Party's existence prior to January of 2009. They don't exist.
They do exist. You just didn't know they existed. Tea Party existed, my friend, in 2006. Yeah, it wasn't called that. That element, that angst, that anger was there. Why do you think Republicans lost Democrats didn't beat Republicans in 2006. Republicans whipped Republicans' ass in 2006. I lost. I knew my election was toast when I left the polling place and a 78-year-old Republican said to me, I didn't vote for you. And I went, why? And he said, because I'm sick of what Republicans are doing. This was a Republican.
But that's not because he wants to go further right. That's because George Bush is so bad.
His reason may have been different from a lot of other reasons, but there was a lot of that anti-establishment republicanism that existed, that thought. And remember, you have to understand the origin story of the Tea Party. It was not right-wing embrace of nationalism and white nationalism. That was not it. It was all around a violation of constitutional norms by the party that advocated for those norms. They were pissed off because of big government republicanism on the war, big government republicanism on the economy, right? Big government republicanism in intrusion, in
All of that might be
No Child Left Behind, all of that fermented within this base.
Economic anxiety, all of big government, big
Right.
spending,
Right.
big programming. Yes, but it did not see it. That pimple did not emerge from the skin until we saw the election of a black titular head of government, head of state.
You can say that, but I would argue, and we can have a longer discussion on that, because you want to pin it to Barack Obama's election. I would say no. I would pin it to George Bush's 2006 midterm. Was when that you didn't recognize it as such, because Democrats won the Congress, right? There was success for the other side.
That's right.
So you weren't looking at,
For my side.
right, what happened inside the Republican Party.
That's right.
Right? Those of us inside the Republican Party knew what was happening.
So you knew that a substantial.
Oh, I knew 2008 was going to be much more difficult because of what started in 2006.
And you knew because in 2006 you are an unsuccessful Senate candidate.
I'm in the mix. I'm on the battlefield, and I'm not taking incoming from your side. I'm taking incoming from the people
From your
supposedly
right.
standing behind me on my right.
But how much of that is we do not want to participate in a world?
You're putting a 2023 analysis
Fair.
on a 2006, 2008, 2009 problem. It's not the same. It is not what drove them. And it's hard to get people to understand that. I believe very much in time, place, and circumstances. I will never look at the founding fathers and apply the current time, place, and circumstances to their era, because I'm going to come out with a very different understanding of history if I do, right? I'm going to be jaundiced in my view. I cannot look, and as a historian, you appreciate this more than most, you cannot look at history through that kind of a lens because you're coloring it differently.
Yeah.
Whether positive or negative, you're coloring it different. You have to see it in the moment. And since I live the moment, I can tell you in the moment what was happening inside my party. I can step back and say, and folks can sit back and say, oh, the Tea Party this and the Tea Party that, but I'm telling you by 2012, that Tea Party no longer existed.
That's why the caucus room, these discussions are important, because we're less concerned about the issues of the day and the horse race of today.
Right.
And we're more concerned with talking to people who were there about context of how we got here.
It's
and
so
06 ain't a long time ago.
It's not a long time ago, but in terms of our politics, it's a lifetime.
It's a lifetime ago, and today, when news and information is delivered between reels and tweets.
No cell phones
That's right.
to speak of. Certainly didn't have iPads, internet.
A lot of cell phones, but no Twitter.
Right, no Twitter, all that. So the information infrastructure was different.
Yeah.
And so the reality of it is that Tea Party, and I'll give you a companion example, Occupy Wall Street. What caused the implosion of Occupy Wall Street?
Left disagreement with the remaining remnants of a Clinton-generated accommodationist Democratic Party.
And that would be what they call themselves? What was that called? The DNC was what did they call themselves, those Democrats, those sort of moderate Democrats?
The Blue Dogs.
Blue Dogs. So, but you recognize historically.
But it wasn't even Blue Dogs. It was just a Democratic Party mainstream, the bulk of the body of the Democratic establishment.
But what happened?
Was fundamentally not willing to.
But what happened to them? Would you? So was the Occupy Wall Street argument, initial argument, legitimized or delegitimized by the breakdown of law and order inside the camps that formed in parks around the country?
I know, I feel as though you want me to say it was delegitimized. Much like it was delegitimized in Seattle in the summers after George Floyd and all that type of stuff. But Occupy Wall Street.
But that was not.
I think two things are important.
But that was not the. But it's not how the mission started.
It's not how the mission started. But I think it's important to
those
understand.
issues about that they were fussy, that people were getting into fights over and harming each other over. That's not what Occupy Wall Street was about.
It wasn't. It was about the economic structure no longer ignoring the needs of people at the bottom.
Guess what Tea Party was about? Those economic structures that no longer acknowledge the least among us, the poor, I'm
gonna defer to you because you were there and you was on that side in the rooms and I wasn't. But the perception of it is that
the perception of it is what the Democrats created of it. The perception of it is what the mainstream media wrote about it.
You in defense of the Tea Party? Is that what
I'm not. No, I'm not. Look, I'm not defending it because I was
contextualizing.
I'm just contextualizing it. I had to stop them from taking out my senators. I lost 2 incredibly good senators in Utah and Delaware because of the Tea Party. In Delaware, I've got a candidate in Christine O'Donnell sitting there talking about, well, I'm not a witch.
Being a witch, yeah.
I mean, really?
Yeah, 2010.
This is what I got to deal with. So yeah, no, give me context. I understand exactly what we're talking about. My point is, Occupy Wall Street and Tea Party are 2 sides of the same coin, just as Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders were 2 sides of the same coin in 2016. So the reality of it is we need to understand how our political system have created this energy.
Yeah. And the thing is, the spectrum is not a line.
It's not a line.
It's a circle. And Trump and Sanders are much closer on that.
It works.
Shout out to Brough Brothers.
He sees it.
Yeah. No, it's a circle. And I think what you're getting at is if you consider it as a circle as opposed to a straight line spectrum, Trump and Bernie are a lot closer together on that circle.
I ran into my first...
It's populism.
Thank you. I ran into my first Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump voter. You know where I ran into them?
New Hampshire.
No, California.
Yeah.
Democratic convention. They were not in California. At the Democratic convention, five young ladies from California I met. And they would stop me because they were like, what are you doing here? Like, I'm working at MSNBC, right? This is my job. I'm covering the campaign. And we get into this. They were pissed. Oh my God, they were pissed at Hillary. And they were pissed at the DNC for protecting and setting up Hillary. So a lot of that Bernie bro business was going on. So we were talking, so I'm like, okay, so I got to ask, how many of y'all voting for Hillary if she's the nominee in against Donald Trump? You know how many raised their hand?
Probably 2. Yeah. Out of how many?
5.
But here's
out of those 5 women. So and
that's all you need. If you're Trump, you don't need 5. You need to make a dent.
Right.
And 2 is a dent.
And 2 is a dent.
Yeah.
And so none of them were voting for Hillary if she were the nominee, because they felt that the system, the DNC, Washington, Hillary, all of them conspired against them. And I'm sitting there going, well, where have I heard that before?
So you're in 2002, one of, if not the only, African-American statewide sitting elected official.
Right.
And you serve a full term as lieutenant governor.
Correct.
But much like when you found the Republican Leadership Council, you're using your position as lieutenant governor to specifically push for minority inclusion.
Absolutely.
And
never forget you're a black man in this country.
You are a black man.
Never forget.
Long before you're a Republican, you're a black man.
Long before. Before I'm Catholic, before I'm a Republican, I am a black man.
And you're pushing for minority inclusion in business and contracting,
right,
in MBEs,
right,
minority business enterprise advancement in the state of Maryland.
Correct.
Break that down. What does that look like? And
it was a wholesale reform of the structure as we knew it. And going back to a point I made earlier, I am very much a contrarian. I am very much against the status quo. I would tell my staff at the RNC, at the county level, in the Annapolis, if we're in a meeting and I'm asking you questions about something we're working on or something we're trying to do, and you tell me I don't know, you tell me, well, it's always been done that way, or you indicate to me that we cannot push up against the system, it is your last day in my office. It is your last day in my office.
Yeah.
Because if you do not have the imagination to see beyond the I don't know, we can't, it's never been done that way, then you can't roll with me. And ask any communications director, political director, chief of staff who's worked for me. That's how I come at it. And so when I get into the conversations with Bob Ehrlich to become his lieutenant governor, I asked him a simple question: what's in my portfolio? Well,
I'm not interested in being a figurehead.
Right. What do you want? I want education. I want economic development. All of it.
Yeah.
All
of it. Yeah. Yeah.
All
of it. And that matters. That
matters.
Yeah.
And you and I know why it matters, and so do folks out there know why it matters to
because
have
I want
all of it.
I want my people to have the opportunities that I've had. And I want to institutionalize the policies to make sure my people have the opportunities that I've had.
So what did we do? We set out to reform from the bottom up, inside out, the entire program. The Office of Minority Business Affairs. We appointed an incredible woman to run that, and I went to the governor and I said, I want this office to be a cabinet level office. Really? Why? Because she otherwise won't have any power.
Yeah.
No one will listen to her. And she will have direct access to you and me. So we elevated the office to a cabinet level office. And once we did that, I proceeded to go about systematically reforming the entire structure. And we put in place my printer protege program so that existing businesses would be required to identify and bring into their sphere of influence and expertise emerging small business owners and teach them the ropes. One of my favorite conversations was with Bank of America because they were not happy with this whole idea of having to,
because this is 20 years ago,
to provide loans to small business owners. And so I remember, I probably shouldn't say this, but
no,
okay,
you should. You should.
Let me take another drink. No,
shout out to Brough Brothers.
Don't get me in trouble. So I'm sitting in this meeting, not with just Bank of America, but the leading banks in Maryland, and I'm laying out this plan that we are now, while we're doing this, crafting into legislation.
Okay.
And they had already gone to the governor. They can come to me.
They circumvent. Let's be clear. All of it means economic development and banking.
And banking.
Is under you.
All of it.
That's right. That's right. But they go to the governor.
They go to the governor. The governor comes to me, Michael, what are you doing? So I'm reforming for you, right? I'm your number two. I was like, this is for you. And so he's like, okay, I need you to meet. I meet with the banks. We sit down up in Baltimore at the World Trade Center.
Okay.
Get them all in. All the banks, all the big banks in Maryland, and sit down.
Subtext. When you are the lieutenant governor, when you are the black lieutenant governor, you have an incredible convening power that you have to use.
Absolutely.
You could bring all the banks to the state, to the table.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the next conversation with the governor is, you know what happened? You know what just happened?
That's right.
I called a meeting and these mofos didn't show up.
That's right. That's right.
And Ehrlich and I, this is why I love him like a brother so much. And I really think people need to appreciate this. We're in our 20th year now since our administration. This man took an enormous risk on me. Made even more perilous for him by giving me power.
But did he really though? Because let's be clear about this. At the time, you're not a baby lawyer anymore.
Not a baby lawyer.
You're not a junior professional.
No.
You are eminently qualified to be not only lieutenant governor, but governor.
But understand this, our Constitution is written such that the only power a lieutenant governor in the state has is the power the governor gives him.
So the risk is investing you with power.
Thank you.
No, it's not, though, because you were qualified to accept that power.
Okay, so you're talking like a black man, not a white man.
I am who I am.
All right, I understand that. But you understand how the white men see it.
He thought it was a perceived risk.
Right, it's a perceived risk. It's not an actual risk, but it's a perceived risk.
It ain't Kwame Ture.
No.
You know?
and so, but the reality of it is, I do appreciate that. I know the risk to him and his power
his
structure.
Political risk. That's
his
right.
Political risk.
That's right.
That's really where I'm coming from. To do what he was about to do.
Come on.
And to give me authority over these institutions, whether it's education, and we're going to start to talk to you about how black folks in the legislature approach education.
Okay.
My problem wasn't with the white people, it was with the black people, but we'll just digress a little bit on that. But the reality of it is, he took that risk, and I will always appreciate him for that, because he didn't have to. He could have just said to me, no, in which case I wouldn't have been on the ticket, because I was like, okay, then what the hell am I here for?
Right.
Or he could have said yes and then said no.
Another pause. A lot of people would have taken that position despite having no authority.
Yes.
And that's an interesting difference between...
And that ain't this brother.
Yeah. But you got to point that out.
You got to point out some people would have taken a position just because they want to have a position.
No, not some. A lot of people. A lot of folks.
A lot of folks.
Because you're in the history books forever.
As subsequently demonstrated, some would argue, that they were not given, my successors have not necessarily, I would say this is a fair critique, have not been given the same level of authority that I was given.
That's right. And I think
to do the things that I did in 4 years.
Yeah, and it's important to point out that a lot of folks would have still taken the job without the authority because their names are in the history books.
Right.
But this isn't, and I think through this a lot when I'm thinking about who we choose to give the assignments of high authority. Black people, who we put in these positions on either side. It matters because this is not your best and highest use in life, right? And this ain't your best and highest job.
It's not.
This ain't your last job.
It's not.
And so you, Cleary Gottlieb, big law partner, and all the other credentials and you could have done anything. So,
but I stayed in the public service space because I believe in what Maybelle taught me and taught my sister. You give with the same hand you receive.
Come on now.
And you live and serve as an example to others. So I cannot just, and I just had this conversation with my son who's full of piss and vinegar about a lot of things. And I said to him, so what are you doing about it? I mean, you're just here bitching to me about it. You're screaming and yelling at me. What are you doing? Put it to use, put it to work. And I say that to a lot of people. You can sit there and throw stuff at the TV camera and at the television and yell and scream, but at some point you gotta be honest with yourself. You ain't getting up and doing anything.
Right.
Imagine if all Dr. King did was say, you know what, that's a shame.
Yeah.
We really should do something about what's happening in Mississippi.
Yeah.
Right? Imagine, more important than Dr. King, imagine if some young person sitting in New York City or in California said, what the hell's going on down there in Alabama? That's a shame.
Yeah.
And didn't get on that bus and go there.
That's right, got on the bus.
It wasn't there to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner.
Yeah.
Northerners, go down.
Go down.
Yeah.
That's it. So that's been my service call in a lot of that. And to have had that actualized by someone who had trust and faith in my ability to honor the responsibility of that and not to have the blowback on them, right? Means a lot. So we reformed it. We sat down in this meeting with the banks, and I'll never forget saying, I was playing and I said, what I need you to do is stop looking at a Black or woman-owned business as a threat to your bottom line, as a customer who is incapable of repaying the loan they're asking for.
That's right. This is not charity. This is
not. These people aren't asking for charity. They're asking you to trust them to repay you like you just trusted that white businessman over there who, last time I checked, was under federal indictment.
Come on now. Yeah.
And yet you're still making loans to him.
Yeah.
His credit is still good with you, despite the fact that the states and the feds are now looking into his business dealings. All right. So I need that same kind of trust for them. Well, we can't. This is the oh my. I said, okay, fellas, what I'm prepared to do, because there was mostly men in the room. Fellas, what I'm prepared to do is to go back to the governor and recommend to the governor that we take all $5 billion of cash we have in your respective banks.
Wait. Now, you're not talking about government programming or financing opportunities. You're talking about
the cash,
state of Maryland resources
we have in banks.
Come on now.
I am prepared to go back to the governor and recommend to the governor that we take all the billions of dollars we have in cash in your respective banks.
And this matters because you have an understanding of the leverage you have.
And put them in Black-owned banks in the state of Maryland.
Come on, Farmers and Mechanics.
There you go.
It's in Baltimore.
There you go.
Let me call John.
I had talked to him.
Come on, man.
Beforehand.
Let me call John.
And told him what I was prepared to do.
Yeah.
The meeting changed. Because they knew, one, I had that access to the governor. They knew, two, I had that ear of the governor, that he would actually listen. And they knew, three, I would never recommend something to the governor that I wasn't prepared to go publicly and fight for and back up on his behalf. That I'm going to give him the cover he needs to make that move. I'm going to put this on the line for him to make the move for every Black business in the state.
And so
we got reforms in place that changed the mechanics and the math, how they calculate and how they would support Black and female-owned businesses through our MBE program and give them the capital they need to do their business. Now, subsequent administrations went back and undid some of that immediately after we left office. They weren't Republican, but
wait. No. This matters.
We tried to do what we tried to do.
This matters. What we're saying is that Democratic administrations, namely
O'Malley and right,
Martin O'Malley and subsequent Democratic administrations,
they reformed the reform. Let's just put it that way.
No, we gotta.
Let me tell you how the impact of it. I'll never forget this. Is such a great moment. I am probably 2 years out of office. I get a phone call from Louisiana, and in Louisiana, what's the brother's name? Who's governor, Republican of Indian?
Bobby Jindal.
Bobby Jindal's governor.
Mm-hmm.
Black business owners in Indiana and Louisiana saw what happened in Maryland, saw the MBE program in Maryland, and was like, oh, we need to do that here, right? And went to Bobby. Bobby was like, no, we ain't doing that. I don't know reasons why he wasn't doing it. So they called me up and said, can you help us convince the governor to do this?
I think there's an important point here. When you assume statewide office as lieutenant governor, or really any of the others, because treasurer, secretary, they're all areas of jurisdiction.
Right.
When you assume statewide office as a Black man, you are immediately a national leader of Black folks.
I found that out. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Who knows?
But it's true.
I didn't know. I didn't, because I never look at myself that way. Look, my character, my nature was shaped by a monastery in which I spent 3 years of my life preparing for life as living a life of poverty, chastity, and obedience as an Augustinian friar. So the first thing I'm learning in life is to die to self. I'm not thinking about, oh, this is This is, so my whole psyche is very different. I'm doing this because the Gospels told me to do this. I'm doing this because it's right to do for my people. I'm doing this because I know where the resources are to do it. So do it. I mean, this is one of the frustrating things for me. I'm looking at a country now that in 40 days will be dancing again on the pinhead of whether or not we can get some piddling 500 people to pass a national budget. Why is that complicated?
Right.
Just do it.
Right.
Right? So that's my orientation. And so when these brothers call me up, I'm like, what? And I'm like, well, how did you find me? They said, well, we went on a website and that the O'Malley administration, so the O'Malley administration has started promoting my reforms as their reform, right? Minus the things that they didn't want to do to appease certain white folks in the state. But we then, from that, we found out that you were the actual architect of this effort. And so we thought better to call you than them.
Yeah.
And the funny part was they had gone through the Obama administration, through the Obama White House, who told them, they said, well, we heard about this reform, these MBE reforms out of Maryland. And they were like, oh, well, you need to talk to Martin O'Malley, right? Because he was the governor of Maryland. So then they did some more stuff and found out that it really wasn't Martin's reform, it was my reform.
Yeah.
And so they called me up and said, I went down to Louisiana and spent a week or two with them, working with them. Tried to get Bobby Jindal on point. He didn't want to do it. I was like, well, okay, so you say you want to help Black people and women. The party wants to open, and our whole thing is pull yourself up by your bootstraps and a rising tide lifts all boats. Well, here's the reform to do that.
But he might have wanted to help, but at the time you're dealing with a 2010 Bobby Jindal who has national
presidential aspirations.
That's right.
And I can't piss off white folks in Iowa because I'm going to need them.
There you go.
Which is why I tried to blow up our primary system and get rid of Iowa as the lead.
That's right.
Democrats, by the way, have it right.
We have done it.
You've done it.
Shout out
Thank
to Jim
you.
Clyburn.
I tried to do it in 2009 and 2010 and was summarily rebuffed by New Hampshire, Iowa.
Before your time, man. Before your time. So let's jump forward. You have a successful term as lieutenant governor, and then you move into being the RNC chair.
Right.
You're challenging to promote principled conservatism.
I am.
Despite this rising tide of crazy.
Right.
Talk about how your term as RNC chairman ends, because you ran again, right?
I did.
And
I ran out of spite. I ran out of conviction, which is a deadly combination. The time I had as RNC chairman was opportunistic and unfortunate. It was opportunistic because I saw a chance to do a lot of things that had never been done in politics. Again, like Maverick John McCain, I like to sort of take the puzzle and go, okay, so what if you put that piece there, right? What if you did that this way?
Civic innovation, yeah.
And I think it's refreshing to do that, to have a new look at old things. And the party was very old, and it was very white. And I understood, I was not delusional about why they elected me. Not all, but some elected me for the purposes of being a counterweight.
Wait, so you're saying you knew from day one?
Oh, absolutely. I was not blind. In fact, it was brought home to me literally 30 minutes after I got elected when a member comes up to me.
Wait, no. So let's, 30 minutes.
After I got elected.
Wait, no, let's set the scene.
So I get elected on the 6th ballot.
In January of 09.
Of 09.
Yeah.
Big deal.
Huge deal.
Historic moment. If you look at the Washington Post photo from that moment, look at the people around me and then look at me.
You're like, what did I do?
And you'll understand exactly the moment it hit me that I just become the national chairman. and the trepidation, because I know these people. I've been with these people. I've served on the executive committee of the RNC as state chairman. There were some things that would come about that I did not expect, which were unfortunate. Friends who showed their true colors. My general counsel, who would later betray me in Reince Priebus for his own political ambition.
Who later became
the chief of staff to Donald Trump.
Chief of staff to Donald Trump, but RNC chair.
RNC chairman to chief of staff.
And he was your general counsel.
He was my general counsel, and he was my prime consigliere. Everything I did, he knew the why I did it, approved the how I did it. So all the bullshit that was put out there about me from him when he was running was that exactly bullshit.
And fun fact,
the spending, the debt. If folks, can I just be honest in just a moment? Y'all can believe me or not, but if you're in politics, you know I'm not lying. If you do a campaign, whether you are running, managing, overseeing, general contractor,
if you in the game,
you in the game. And if you don't spend every damn dime you get, if you don't have a debt after you run a campaign for office, whether you win or lose, then you've not run a campaign for office.
You didn't leave it on the field. Because a campaign is an exercise in resource management. At the end of a campaign, I should not have excess resources.
You should not have excess.
I should have left all the resources on the field.
All the resources on the field.
And frankly, gone into some debt.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But that became, for me, a problem. It showed that I was not fiscally prudent. I didn't know how to manage money.
No. This is what they were going to say.
That's what they were going to say.
But let's be clear. Reince Priebus
approved every dollar I spent.
Former NAACP intern.
Yeah, there you go.
For fun fact's sake.
Fun fact's sake.
Fun fact's sake. So you get maligned.
Yeah.
And I think it's objective at this point to say unfairly, right? And
I would say unfairly because, look, I own up on the exuberance and the lack of critical thinking that I sometimes showed in trying to push the envelope and do things. The judgment was not always instinctual. In other words, your instincts would tell you you really shouldn't do that, right? But you do it because, like, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to move it.
And you're in the heat. You're
in the heat. You're going to do it.
Yeah.
So So I fully take ownership of that. But in the main, it all kind of contributed to winning 63 House seats, 8 governorships, 12 governorships, flipping 11 state legislatures, and winning the most any Republican had won since 1928, and they have not been able to win since.
I think that's an important point.
Putting it all on the field.
You leave it on the field.
Yeah.
It's an important point because at the end of the day, your tenure as RNC chair
is based on 2 things.
Based on your tenure, if you look at the electoral results, which are for you to control the House, control the Senate, and win the presidency, your tenure was extraordinarily successful.
Yeah, set it up.
Republicans.
Right, for Republicans. And they couldn't close the deal in 2012. I'd given them the House.
Well, you could say that you couldn't close the deal, but I would tend to say nobody was going to beat Barack.
Barack could have been beaten in 2012. He could have been beaten in 2012.
But I would say he was an extraordinarily talented politician.
He very much so. So that means you have to have a different way of looking at the game with an extraordinarily talented politician on the other side.
Fair enough.
And you cannot look at the game through a conventional lens, which Republicans did. You do not start a presidency of the opposition party with, we're going to make him a one-term president, because you've already shown you are weak.
Regardless of policy.
You've already shown you're afraid of him.
Rush Limbaugh, I hope he fails.
You've already shown and for me, I wasn't afraid of Barack. I'm like, okay, dude, lay out your best, because I'm coming for it. Now, at the end of the day, I beat him on Obamacare because I won. Short-term gain. Now, the long-term game, Nancy Pelosi won because she got it passed and it's now in the bloodstream, Obamacare of the country. But that's the game. You got to play the game you're in. You got to play the chessboard in front of you, right? I can't play for 2012, right? Because I'm playing 2010. Although I'm a long-term player, I'm thinking long-term. I'm setting up.
But the
future
playoffs is here.
Playoffs is here.
Yeah.
I'm setting up. I can't talk about next year's Super Bowl. I got to talk about the one that's coming up, right?
Yeah.
So that's the reality for me as a national chairman was, how do I position the players to win the game they're in, to win the game right now in front of us, whether it's winning on against the Democrats on Obamacare or winning the governorship of Virginia. How do I do that? So I have to go out and win at all costs. I've got to go out and raise the money to do that when Karl Rove and the establishment are now telling donors, don't give to the RNC because they're wasting your money.
Oh, no. But what you're not saying that I'm going to say, don't give to the RNC, is what they were really saying, is don't give to the RNC because this black dude is wasting it. And we're going to get rid of him.
We're going to get rid of him.
And order will be restored.
Right. So Karl Rove writes an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal in January, February, somewhere right in the beginning of the primary season, talking about the failure of the RNC, the inability of this chairman. Now, there's a backstory because Karl Rove was pissed at me because in 2006, I called him out on Katrina.
Come on now.
Katrina.
George Bush don't care about black folks. Kanye wasn't wrong. Come on now.
And I'm running for the U.S. Senate. And look, one, full disclosure, I've been a longtime supporter of both Bushes. My family and the Bush family have been close. And what I said was that George Bush was poorly served politically in 2005.
And Karl Rove was his political advisor.
And that putting the president in a helicopter, having him looking down on dying grandmothers.
Yes.
Dying grandmothers.
Meanwhile,
on the bridge.
when in New York at 9/11, he was on the smoldering hills.
Thank you.
On the ground.
Right. So I've got to be me, honestly, authentically me, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Again, don't put my party above my country. I don't put my party above my personal integrity. And I know they supported me. I got the phone call from the president asking me to run for the U.S. Senate. And when the Katrina question came up, I said the president was poorly served politically. Karl didn't like that.
But again.
And so they came after me.
But you're not in Louisiana.
I'm not in Louisiana.
You are
in Maryland.
A national black leader by virtue of you being one of very few African-American statewide officers. And therefore, you have some responsibility to speak for and speak up for allocation of resources going in the direction of these black people who are clearly being left out.
And when you can't get water.
Come on, man.
You can't get
water
on
rooftops
delivered.
It's hot.
Thank you. So how do I then come back to my community and have a conversation with them saying I want to represent your interests when I can't authentically and honestly represent their interest? Again, as my mama told me, I gotta lead as if everybody's watching me at all times.
Come on, man.
Not just when it's convenient for me or comfortable for me.
And not just when it concerns citizens of Maryland.
Bingo. So we go through this whole thing in the 2010 cycle, and my goal is to win. Rove and others are writing these stories about, but for this chairman, we could probably win a lot of seats, but at most we could win 39.
How did it go so fast?
And I'm like,
at 39?
39?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I now know my target.
Yeah. Let me blow that out the water.
Yeah.
But how does it go so fast from you are our guy, January of 2009, to but for this chairman?
One word.
Let me guess it.
One word. You know it.
Black card? That's 2 words.
No, not black card.
I don't know.
Money.
Okay.
What do I do the first week? If I'm going to admit a mistake, this was my first biggest mistake at the RNC. And I would do the same thing, I just do it differently. What do I do the first week I'm there? I fire everybody.
Wow.
What is the second thing I do? I shut down about $20 million in contracts that had been pre-ordered off of the 2008 election, meaning that contracts were agreed upon that Mike Duncan, who was the then chairman, would get reelected chairman in the 2009 balloting. I pop up, I win, all of that goes away. So they present.
Which, by the way, the RNC, the DNC are massive, multifaceted corporations.
Right.
Political corporations. Any CEO of a new corporation, be it a nonprofit, a university, or a publicly traded widget maker, has the right to re-examine contracts from the previous leadership.
Absolutely. And so they come in and wanted me to sign these contracts.
Last thing I'll say, corporations, even DNC, RNC, political corporations, are massive economic opportunity generators.
Absolutely.
So people are making tremendous amounts of money.
Absolutely.
From contracts.
Absolutely.
In this space.
Exactly.
And you come in.
Especially when you say to them, here is your bonus on the back end of an election you just lost.
Come on now. Oh, you lost.
We didn't win in 28.
Come on now.
Did we win in 2008?
You did not.
No.
Not a success.
So why am I writing you a $5 million check?
A participation trophy.
All right. Not on my watch. I'm a fiscal conservative.
And then we'll get into this. We'll have you back. And we'll get into this. There's real money moving through
Oh my God, there's real money. Yes. And what Rove unleashed and discovered was the grift game.
Come on now.
Inside the party.
Okay.
And that during that latter half of the Bush years, separate and apart from George Bush and his administration, within the RNC, which was the political arm of the administration, you had this sort of game that was being played. They do these contracts and they would back in dollars. And so I'm sitting there and someone says, here's an $8 million check we got to pay to XYZ company. I'm like, why? Well, this was their bonus. So why didn't they get paid their bonus before we got the election results? They did the election by that point. The election was over. The work of consultants and all that ends literally a week or two before the election, because at that point the game is now it's all turnout.
Well, and there's cleanup stuff and there's wind down stuff.
But it's not $8 million worth.
No, not at all. And that's the thing. Like, look, I have made my career off of political consulting.
Right.
But the reality of the matter is, and this is a story that I don't think is told, you disrupted the paper.
I disrupted the paper.
And you didn't disrupt black folks' money.
I pissed off.
You didn't disrupt black folks' money.
I pissed off white.
You was the black dude disrupting a whole lot of money going to a whole lot of
white folks.
Rich, influential, beltway white folks who have eaten off of this congressional industrial complex.
Going back probably to, I don't know.
The 40s?
40s, 50s.
Yeah. And so that can't be underestimated.
Yeah.
The magnitude of that.
It was huge. And it was, once that week went by, 3 weeks later was the first time there was calls for my being fired or removed as chairman.
And this is
3 weeks in the job.
And the weird, ironic juxtaposition here is that you ultimately get fired for disrupting establishment economics. Yep. Meanwhile, the party is communicating to this anti-establishment external world, right?
You see the irony.
Speak on it. Speak on it, man. Come on.
It is absolutely the wildest thing. And it really kind of, in one sense, I remember being quoted as saying, if I were not RNC chairman, I would be Tea Party. And the reason I said that was because of exactly what you're saying, and what I was seeing inside this structure was, I knew as a county and state chairman, I didn't want the RNC anywhere near the state of Maryland, because all it was a grift. All it was pay me for our consultants to run campaigns in a state we know nothing about.
Yeah.
Unless you are of Maryland, You cannot come into this state. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. This is very unique, as most states are, and think you're going to get elected a candidate, particularly a Republican candidate, in a state in which the propensity of the voters is towards Democrats. So unless you come from a state where that's a propensity, like a Maine or a Boston,
Massachusetts.
or Massachusetts, you're not of much use to me.
Right.
Because you don't know the thinking of a Democrat that you need to switch to get them to vote for a Republican. The persuadables. So I was like, nah, y'all stay away. And so it was really, when I got into, here's the irony. The members elected me because they knew that about me, and they wanted me to do that. They wanted me to come in and to break the stranglehold that the consultants and the money class and all of those folks had on the party, the vendors. I mean, they wanted that stopped. And so what did I do? I came in and said, it's done. We're not doing it anymore. So you know what? Iowa, Michigan, Arizona, Nebraska, North Dakota, Florida, New York, California, you give me a plan and I'll fund your plan.
Yeah.
You give me the plan of how, you tell me how you're going to win elections in 2010. You tell me what elections, which seats you think you can take, all of the metrics I need to know. We'll take it, run it through, we'll get our political people, we'll meet and talk. And if it works, I'll fund it.
But what I'm not going to do is
I'm not just sending money into your state just because.
Well,
and I'm not going to require you to hire my vendors.
That's right.
So you give me your plan includes what you're going to pay for vendors who know your state.
Yeah.
So you're going to pay for your local talent to run your local races. And by local races, I mean governor, U.S. Senate, federal, whatever. Because that's local to you.
And what I'm not going to do is pay $5 million to the dude in Bethesda.
No, I'm not.
Or Potomac.
Not happening.
Yeah.
Not happening. And I didn't.
And you paid the price for that.
I paid a price for it. And that's fine. But, as much as they threw me out and talked about me and still do and claim that, what they like to hang their hat on was the wonderful episode with the finance staffer who went to the lesbian-themed strip club.
Which is a place that
I didn't understand what the problem was. I really didn't understand what the problem was beyond using an RNC club credit card. But she got fired for it. We got the money back, and we did that all within 24 hours of realizing or being told what had happened.
You get the money. You are remunerated.
Yeah,
within 24 hours.
Yeah, the donor that took her to that club after. Here's the story. So. We hosted this big fundraising event with our young guns, right? These are young donors under 45, young men and women of means who can write big checks. And so we had a fundraiser in California, in LA, and after this event, the donor who helped organize, working with our finance department, and we had staff on the ground. They said, hey, we're going out afterwards. Do you want to come with us? Sure. Young lady in her 20s said, yeah, I'll go. And so she's thinking, rightly, this is further opportunity for her to schmooze with these donors and to get them to like her more and to like what we're doing more and sell what we're doing and get future donations. All normal stuff. Happened to be at a lesbian-themed strip club in LA that I think, if I'm not mistaken from the reports, was a co-owner or partial owner was Nicole Kidman. So it was just, you couldn't write this shit.
Hollywood liberals.
You couldn't write it better. But I don't know if that part of it was true or not, really didn't care. Meanwhile, while this is happening, and this is an important part of the story, while this is happening, I'm hosting our winter meeting in Hawaii. So I am 6,000 miles away from Washington, 3,000 miles away from LA. This happens in January, February of 2010 when we hold our winter meeting. In April, when we put out our FEC report, someone inside the RNC decided to put in the FEC report the details of this California event, which immediately, for reporters who scour our FEC reports, because remember, as I said before, we're required to disclose all of our expenses and donations every 30 days.
Right.
So they instead of what typically happens is you put fundraiser, Four Seasons, $10,000 in expenses, $100,000 in revenue.
Oh, you do the minimum disclosure.
Minimum disclosure.
Somebody went into detail.
They had the name of the club, the address,
the Spearmint Rhino. Yeah.
and everything, right? Yeah. So you see the setup, right?
Sure.
So I'm out by April, I'm now in the hunt for setting up our 2012 convention. So I'm going around the country visiting sites where we could potentially have our convention. I'm in Arizona because that was one of the sites we were looking at. My chief of staff comes in, ashened. Chairman, I need you to step out of the meeting. What's wrong? I can't talk about it here. He pulls me aside. Tucker Carlson, who had just started the Daily Caller, somehow had gotten this story about RNC credit card paying for $2,500 at a dominatrix lesbian strip club.
Sheesh.
Is about to write this story, and they wanted to get a quote from the chairman. I'm like, what the hell, right? What are you talking? I don't know what you're talking about. I've never gone to a strip club as chairman.
As chairman.
As chairman. I don't know what you're talking about. So we corral ourselves. I could fly back to Washington. That's how serious I took this. I flew back to Washington because I wanted to know what the hell had happened here. Because again, we're the party of Christian values, family values, right? And strip clubs, apparently. So I get back, we sit down, go through this everything, figure out what had happened. Young lady goes to the club. The gentleman, the bill comes at the end of the evening. She, thinking like a finance person does, who's in fundraising mode, says, oh no, I got it, no problem. Pays for it with the RNC credit card, which is what she would typically do.
Right.
It's a corporate card. It's a corporate card paying for a client's expense.
That's right.
Pays for it, $2,500, boom. 3 months, 4 months later, everything comes together. I'm on the phone with people trying to resolve this. And Carlson wants to write the story as if I was there. Tucker, he wasn't there. The chairman was in Hawaii. He wasn't there. He didn't authorize this. The young lady made a mistake. She had, by this point, been fired, right? We contacted the donor. He had reimbursed us the $2,500. There's no story here, right? At least not the one that they want to write.
Yes, the story is black chairman
with money,
irresponsible
with money and debauchery, right? And I learned a lesson from Secretary Brown, Ron Brown, many, many years before.
So wait. The idea that you're referring to Ron Brown, who is on the Mount Rushmore, in my mind, of real Negro politicians. Harold Washington, Ron Brown, and maybe a few others.
Right.
The idea that you about to reference Ron Brown, just instills upon me that you are who you say you is. Right?
Yeah.
So Ron
Brown and I had gotten to know each other many years before, various circles in town, and I never forget, we were talking, and he said, because he had gone through some stuff in his various roles, and he said, Michael, you should always remember when they come at you, they're going to come at you on two fronts. They're going to come at you on money, and they're going to come at you on women, sex. He said, that's it. He said, when you see, he said, you'll know it when you see it. You'll see the setup. They're going to come at you. He said, never forget, they're going to,
and with that strip club, they got you on both.
They got you on both.
Yeah.
And so he said, don't, whatever you do, don't forget, they're going to come at, and recent history is replete with that. Marion Barry, the whole thing, there are all these examples of where they come at black men, whether they're in politics or not. The hook is they are loose with their private parts, or they're loose with other people's money.
Other people's money, right. So you win statewide office, lieutenant governor in Maryland in 2002, and you're a big deal in your state and even nationally.
Right.
But in 2006, you take on a national candidacy in running for the United States Senate.
Right.
And that candidacy was ultimately successful. But I want you to talk, unsuccessful.
Right,
But I want you to talk about the transition from the lights and the scrutiny of being a big deal on the state level to what does that look like when you're trying to run for the United States Senate, when national interests and global interests and national money are suddenly involved in whether or not you succeed.
Right.
So what's it like to all of a sudden be under a much bigger magnifying glass of that federal stage?
So it's I guess for me, it probably will ring a little bit different than it would for most politicians. And a lot of it has to do, A, with how Maybelle raised me, B, my walk along the way into a very different space. I mean, there are a lot of politicians who are ministers and things like that, but to make a conscious decision to live a life of poverty, chastity, and obedience, to live in a monastic setting, and to be that person, it's a little bit, it comes out a little bit differently for how you look at things. So I never got caught up in all of that. I figured, God put me here and he gave me a talent, a gift to run my mouth and to say things that some people otherwise wouldn't say, and to do things that some people otherwise wouldn't do. And that I'm blessed to be able to do that. I don't know where it's going to go. I'm honest to God telling, I had no plan. I was like, oh yes, I want to be a senator. Oh yes. In fact, I don't have a legislative mind. I admit that freely, and did. At the time, I said I had much more of an executive thought about things. It's like, okay, can we just do this and cut out the BS? I don't have time to go talk to 99 other people to get their approval, right? We need to do this. But the call, in keeping with the idea of a calling, vocation, the call was this service at this time. And so I'm like, okay, if this is the call to do this service at this time, we'll do it. That began, however, I think before 2006. In 2004, 2 years or a year into my job as lieutenant governor, I got a call from the RNC and from our presidential candidate at the time to speak at the national convention. And that's an incredible honor to do that, because
national stage, no podium. I remember you're standing out on the open stage.
And it's not easy. It's not easy.
It's bright lights.
It's bright lights. And it's a vote of confidence that your party has in you to put you in that spot.
And let's be clear, this is after Barack in Boston 04. Y'all follow that.
Right.
And so brighter lights.
Brighter lights.
Because there's a brother.
So this is one of, again, going back to something I said earlier, this is why, for me personally, it was so important for him and I to have a conversation one-on-one. Because our public political lives nationally paralleled each other.
Yeah.
And he was either one step ahead of me or I was one step ahead of him and we always wound up at the same space.
Your peers.
We're peers. And I always thought it was important for me personally to tell him, I got your back. Don't let the label fool you. Because at the end of the day, this is what matters. At the end of the day, this is what matters. I got to have your back, and I hope you have mine. He didn't in 2006. He was the only black man, only black politician to campaign against me in 2006. The only one.
So you're saying, wait, I want to make sure I understand.
The only one.
I want to make sure I understand.
Not Al Sharpton.
Yeah. Sharpton, the CBC.
None of them.
Clyburn.
Go back and look. None of them came into Maryland and campaigned against me.
For the United States Senate.
For the United States Senate. He was the only one not only to come into Maryland, but he came literally 1 mile from my house to campaign against me at Prince George's County Community College.
But he knows at that point that he has national responsibilities to the National Democratic Party. And part of that is preserving Democratic Senate seats. Because he's a member of the Senate at this point.
So what's your point? I don't know. What's your point?
My point is.
What's your point?
My point is, my Brough Brothers assisted point is that we could look at that as brother attacking black on black crime.
Okay.
Or we could look at that as he was the black senator at the time. He had a responsibility to preserve Democratic seats, even if he were campaigning against an African-American man who is a Republican.
Okay.
So he's doing his job, you're doing your job.
Okay, if that's what you want to go with.
but I think it's interesting.
You can go with that.
I think it's interesting though, and I'm gonna end on this critical thesis. At the end of the day, he was the only black politician.
Because I was gonna say, all those other brothers, campaigned too.
And they had responsibilities
too.
He was the one.
And Al Sharpton was bigger than Barack at that, you know what I'm saying, in that space until he becomes Barack of 08.
Sure.
But so if Al is like, you know what, Steele, we know who you are.
And that's the thing. Al knew
which is why it was important
that you
for him.
are Mike from Petworth.
Which is why it was important for Barack to know.
Yeah.
And which is why I tried to
have that one-on-one.
Because it was important. It was look. And this goes, I think, in the long run to a bigger narrative in our community. We're the only tribe that turns in on itself at times, and gets manipulated into doing that, and that's not healthy for us.
Because you're a man who, yes, you are at this point a well-established member of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
But you have spent your adult professional life pushing for black folks.
I'm fighting your issue inside my tent.
Yeah.
So why just don't say anything. Give me the latitude to do it. If I'm not doing it correctly, correct me. I'm always up for that. Always want to be correct in what I'm doing. And if I'm doing it incorrectly, if I'm not legitimately expressing the concerns of my community to my tribe, the Republicans, at this time, then correct me on it.
But the challenge there is, if he thinks you're wrong on Iraq, if he thinks your party is wrong on pro-life versus pro-choice,
exactly.
What responsibilities does he have?
Work it out.
If he thinks you're wrong,
work it out. I had to work this shit out. Why don't you work it out? I got to work it out every day.
Right.
I'm juggling and balancing just like you are. I seem to work it out. Why can't you work it out? That's all I'm saying. Work it out.
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't discuss.
And work it out with me.
Work it out with me. Let's have the look. I mean, it ain't nothing wrong with having the conversation beforehand.
Yeah.
Okay, look, I'm going.
The meeting before the meeting.
A meeting for me. I'm going to say this, so don't get your hair all messed up. All right.
Yeah.
All right. You're going to say that, and I promise you, I won't be mad.
But this is coming from a place where you in the game, you're a veteran in the game. You have had the meeting before the meeting with a whole lot of folks.
Yeah.
A whole lot of folks.
Yeah. Look, Al Sharpton, Al Sharpton is a good brother. I love him to death, and we have Al and Al will tell
Shout out to Reverend Al, man. We have been on the show
yes,
multiple times.
Absolutely. Shout out to the Reverend.
And you talking about somebody who has come a long way, in terms of where he first entered on the national scene and how
and have the wounds in his back from his own tribe to prove it, right?
Yes, indeed.
So when I say what I say about working it out, he is a good example of what I'm talking about. And Al and I've gotten into it on his show, but in that race in 2006, Al told me personally on the phone, we know who you are.
Come on now.
So,
but
we're not worried about. To your point, we're not worried about you on Iraq and the war in Iraq. We're not worried about you on this, that. What we're worried about, what we would be worried about you on issues related to us.
Where are you at on black people?
There you go.
But
that's all.
Al told you that.
He told me that
because Al gave you the professional courtesy of a conversation.
And Al would have otherwise made it clear, you ain't right on our stuff, so don't expect us to be right just because you black. We're gonna give you cover.
Yeah.
So, and that for me is fair. That's fair game. Look, we need folks who are prepared to go move the mountain that King referred to.
Come on.
For us.
Yeah.
Because he can no longer do it. So we need people to do that. And for my public service has been, how do I move the damn mountain? Dr. King wasn't taught. I was 5 years old when he showed up in my backyard.
Come on, man.
In 1963.
That's interesting because I hear Bryant Gumbel talking about Ali walking through his neighborhood and what it felt like to see that king, now deified, but to see that king in his neighborhood.
In my neighborhood.
And you're talking about, this is the second time, so I know it's real. You're talking about seeing that king, no pun intended, but pun intended, you're seeing this deity in your neighborhood.
In my neighborhood.
Talking to your people.
Right. But you know what I realized many years later? He wasn't talking to those gathered in that mall. He was talking to me.
You! Come on, man. Yeah.
And he was talking to the kids at Howard University that I was with last night.
Yeah.
He was telling them, I have a dream, but you're going to have to do the work.
You got to execute it. Yeah.
You got to do the work.
You got to execute it.
And so for me,
I may not get there with you.
Come on now. You got to do the work.
Yeah. Everybody talks about, U2 sings about early morning, April 4th.
Right.
But April 3rd.
April 3rd.
Come on now.
April 3rd.
Come on now.
April 3rd is the day. And so that for me is the animation of my service in public life. It is also a guiding principle in how I connect with and interact with my members of my family, my community, black men and women who are not of my party, right? And what I try to get them to understand is, at the end of the day, white folks only see black.
Yeah.
They don't see Republican or Democrat.
Yeah.
They only see black. I mean, and that's just 400 years of that.
Yeah.
All right? I don't care, enlightened, whatever. That's 400 years of that. Now, I may be old school in that thinking, and some folks today may have a different approach to it. Fine, have that approach. But as I've been saying for 40 years now, since my late 20s, at the end of the day, America ain't gonna get right until black and white folks get right with each other.
But it's
just the nature of the 1619. It is the nature of 1619.
But that's the nature of what Mandela is talking about when you had in South Africa, you had in post-Nazi Germany, a great reconciliation.
Yeah.
In which we say, we're going to deal with this original sin
right,
of South Africa. We're going to deal with this origin sin of Germany, and we're going to find a way to reconcile these interests. And however we get there, both sides are going to commit to never again.
Never again, period. So this is the truth. People today And this relates back to everything I did as Lieutenant Governor on MBE reform and education reform, criminal justice reform. It relates to what I tried to do as RNC chairman on debating healthcare, economic policy. Everyone's talking about and bragging about 2049, 2035, friggin' pick a year.
Yeah. I mean,
This country will be a majority minority country.
Yeah.
And I say, really? So what does that mean? And they look at you like, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, okay, so black and brown people are the majority. Are they running Wall Street?
We don't run the power structures. Yeah.
Are they running the politics of the country?
Yeah.
Are they running the business affairs? If they're not, then we're nothing more than South Africa.
Come on now.
That's all we are.
Tyranny of the minority.
We are the majority.
Yeah.
But we're still. I mean, the fact that you refer to us as the minority majority. You didn't refer to us as we are the majority. You said we become the majority minority.
Yeah.
The minority majority. So we need to correct our own thinking about our projection, our future, and where we're going. And we need leaders to do that. And so it's been hard doing it from this space, which now, ironically enough, is kind of freed up for me because of all the crazy out of Trump.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have to get stuck on stupid around this or that policy per se. I can talk more broadly about, well, what kind of country do you want?
Right. Right.
Well, how do you see yourself fitting into this country? And do I fit in too? Do you see me standing next to you or not?
Who are we?
Who are we?
If we look in the mirror.
Who are we? And if you don't see me, then okay, now we have a different conversation. Because we're no longer talking about whether or not you agree with Obamacare. We're talking about whether or not black folks should even be here.
Mm-hmm.
Or
fundamental right to exist. Yeah.
And so this is what this, for all of its consternation and frustration and pain in some cases, the last 7-8 years, that's really the culmination of what we're going to be confronting as we look into the next election cycle. Is, do you see me here standing next to you? It's like that line from the movie, I'm just a boy standing next to a girl. Do you know that? So, I'm just a black man standing next to a white man. Do you see me?
Right. And so we could talk this stuff all day, man, and you have led us down into the deep treasure trove of American political history and the history and importance of civic leadership. But I think as we draw to a close, I want to ask you.
Yeah.
You still identify as a Republican.
Yes.
What is your take on the current state, 2023, of the Republican Party?
Mm-hmm. I need to get the hell up out of here.
But you haven't.
I haven't.
And so what is your take on it? We understand, and you have laid out quite eloquently how we got here.
Right.
Why are you still there? And what is the thing that's keeping you there as a man who we know has a heart for God, a heart for people, and a heart for black people? So
the funny reason I stay is because it pisses them off.
You're a contrarian.
I'm a contrarian.
You said that the whole time.
It pisses them off. It's just like, can we not get rid of him, right? Why won't he go away? Because that's the easiest thing to do, is to make it go away. Make the pain go away that we don't want to confront. Make the truth go away that we don't want to acknowledge. Take down the mirror that he's holding up that shows just how ugly we look right now, that Dorian Gray kind of comparison, if you will.
I gotta get into the literature to know that reference, by the way.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Portrait of Dorian Gray.
I just kind of read a book.
Oscar Wilde. Get on that. Yeah.
I love Oscar, by the way. He's a good brother. But the reality of it is, so there is that piece of it. But here's the other piece that's more important than that. I was here before all this stuff began.
Come on, man. I've been here.
I carried the water when it wasn't
I built this.
fashionable. Yeah.
Yeah.
I took the hit when nobody else cared. And I did it because, and that's, I referenced this early, because my mama raised me to do it that way.
That's a constant theme, man. And I know she's top of mind because she just transitioned, but this is authentic with you. My mama, this is a consistent theme.
You go back, you can go find tape from me 20 years ago saying, that's how my mama raised me. My mama raised me to be this man in front of you that has to be accountable for what he says and what he does. And actually what he believes, right? Because if I'm going to put that belief, if I just sat here and kept my beliefs to myself, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not impacting you, I'm just me. But if I'm out here saying this is what I believe and this is what I need you to know about my belief and why I think my belief is important for you to know, and in fact, if my belief can influence your behavior, then I got to be accountable for that, right? I got to hold that water in the container I've created, and own it. And so, for me, being a Republican, that's why I refer to myself two ways. Again, as a Lincoln Republican, because I believe in the fundamental founding of the party and the individual liberties of every person. We weren't fighting over the cost of bread or inflation or taxes or our relationship with France or Great Britain. We went to a civil war over your rights to exist and be free. That's why the party was founded. That's what Lincoln, even though he was trepidatious and concerned and fearful of leaning into what he knew to be true, authentically true, that all men are created equal. It didn't say all white men.
Yeah.
It said all men. And he fought for that, which is why he begrudgingly brought himself to writing the Emancipation Proclamation and said, okay, what the hell, here it is. There it is, folks. Do with it because that's what I believe, right? So I understand his walk as one of the founders of this party. I also understand the walk of a Frederick Douglass, who sat there, not in the background, but went out and gave speeches and talks and authored this party into existence and gave it rhetorical truth to latch on to. It wasn't just Edmund Burke and sort of this conservative Burkean philosophy, which a whole lot of white Republicans like. I'm like, let's go back to talk about what Frederick Douglass said.
Yeah.
Real time about slavery and freedom, and how that was anchored into those men who took the political risk, expended a hell of a lot of political capital to break away from the Whig Party, to start something, and then, peep this, 6 years later, 4 years later, elect a president of the United States, who would then be there at a critical juncture of national crisis to weather that storm with the country, with this philosophy that all men are created equal. So that's my anchor. I'll argue all day with my brother here on whatever policy you want, but at the end of the day, we're always going to be standing on the same side when it comes to your right and my right and the freedoms that are attached to that under the Constitution. That, to me, is the anchor of republicanism. Now, I also refer to myself as a Motel 6 Republican.
Break that down.
Because someone's got to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
So I stay inside the party with the mirror and the porch light on to say, when all this madness stops, we're going to be inside here rebuilding, putting up new curtains, and welcoming new faces and voices.
Because we live in a two-party system.
Because we live in a two-party system, which I will tell you should be a multi-party system.
Maybe it should be, but for our adult realities and the time that you and I have been practitioners in this game, you had a two-party choice.
A two-party choice.
And
so I want to be a viable choice for the American people again. And I don't know, honestly, if it will be within this shell, within this structure known as the RNC and the Republican Party, but this philosophical orientation will be planted somewhere. I'm already having those conversations.
Yeah.
It will be planted somewhere that Americans of all stripes can look at and go, I see myself reflected in that, and that's where I want to be. And so that's what motivates me now and pushes me and moves me now. This form of the party is lost. This form of the party has been magnified. And it is on, in my view, a path of self-destruction or extinction. Something else, whether within that shell, like a phoenix rising, will emerge, or something else outside of that shell will be developed and called the new home or the new frontier for Republican thinking. But it will happen in one of those two forms. It's just a matter of progression and how I can help further the extinction of this thing, accelerate it, if you will, to create something new from within or outside, or however else that may play itself out over the next 3, 5, 8, 10 years.
Well, look, man, the proper demonym for someone who has achieved the office of lieutenant governor is governor.
Right.
So, Chairman, Governor Michael Steele,
Thank you.
You have given us a history lesson. You have given us a gut check and a soul check on where we come from in this political space, and what it means to be not only a Black Republican and yes, an independent thinker, but most importantly, someone who is principled and has integrity and their personal values guiding them as their guide to participation in this political game.
No, I appreciate that, brother.
You and I have made a lifetime and a career out of. We got to have you back because we got to talk about what it's like to be a talking head. That's how I met you.
Yeah.
And
no, it'll be that part of it. It'll be a lot of fun, and I think we'll have a lot of good, conversation and reason to have that conversation, because that's another important space, the role of the media in sort of facilitating a lot of what we see playing out right now.
And we've even heard tonight how, look, I'm coming up, I'm junior in the game,
Right.
I'm reading media telling me who you were.
Right.
But it's important for us to establish who you were.
Right.
So on that note, we start where we began. My brother, cheers to Maybell.
Maybell. Oh,
Congratulations
man.
on a remarkable career
Thank you.
having been built in this game.
I appreciate it.
We appreciate your contributions, brother.
Thank you, my man. Thank you.
Cheers, man.
And cheers.
Solid stuff.
This is so good. This is so good.
Shout out to Brough Brothers, man. We got you about.
Oh my gosh, it's so good.
Thank you for doing this with us, man.
No, man, I can't believe I kept you all this time.
No, I kept you. I appreciate you, man. And you ain't driving.
I ain't driving. I texted my wife. She says, "You home yet?" I'm like, "Nah, I'm still talking."
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
This is the Caucus Room.
I love it. I love it. This is so good. It's so good. Cheers, brother.
See you soon.